guys tonight. We slip into soft shadows and deeper snowdrifts all the way back to one of the most unsettling and coldly methodical moments in royal history. You're standing at the edge of a quiet city in the Ural Mountains, Yekaterinburg, its streets dark, tense, and dusted in a bitter July frost that feels more like mid-November. The air smells like damp wood and distant gun oil. You're not really dressed for this, but no one here is exactly comfortable. And you're about to follow a family whose name once shook the world straight into a house with no exit signs. This isn't your typical bedtime story. There's no happy ending tucked under the pillow, no sudden rescue by dashing princes or last-minute telegrams. You're drifting into the final hours of the Romanovs, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this with your illusions intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your city and local time in the comments. I always love knowing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's July 1918. The Russian Revolution has already chewed through empires like they were crusty biscuits. The Romanovs, once Russia's divine right dynasty, are no longer your imperial highnesses. They're just citizen Romanov now. You stand outside the Ipatiev house, ironically renamed the House of Special Purpose, which sounds like a bad Cold War euphemism and kind of is. Tall wooden fences box it in. Curtains are drawn. No one goes in. And if someone does come out, they don't talk. You creep closer past street corners where red guards mutter and smoke. There's a silence to this place that isn't just quiet, it's too quiet, like the house itself is holding its breath. It's not a prison in any official sense, but it has more guns than a small war, and the guards outnumber the residents 3-1. You peer through a gap in the boarded windows and spot a flicker of movement, a girl young, maybe 17, twirling a pencil between her fingers. That's probably Maria. Or maybe Anastasia. They blur together now, don't they? They're all in loose blouses and plain skirts, imperial crests traded for wool socks and cracked heels. Inside, the mood is off. Imagine trying to host a tea party in a crypt. The Romanovs have been shuffled around since the abdication of Nicholas II in 1917. First Tsarskoye Selo, then Tobolsk, and now this final terminal stop. The Bolsheviks don't really know what to do with him. They're too royal to release, too inconvenient to parade, and too alive to ignore. It's the political version of having a bomb in your closet you can't safely move, but also can't leave ticking. Even the weather feels symbolic. July should be warm, but in Yekaterinburg, the cold doesn't quite leave. Nights are sharp. You can see your breath. There's fog on the windows that never clears. People say history moves in seasons, but here, it just stalls in a kind of dreadful winter twilight. The local Bolsheviks, fanatical, suspicious, not exactly subtle, have been growing impatient. They whisper in corners, write coded letters, and they really don't like the Romanovs being here. Not just because they're imperial, but because they still look like they matter. The town's divided. Some peasants feel sorry for the family, others want blood. One story says a nun tried to sneak food to them and nearly got shot. Another says the guards used to gossip about the girl's beauty, like it made them somehow less mortal. Historians still argue whether Lenin personally gave the final order to kill them, or if it was a local initiative rubber-stamped by the top. What's clear is that something is being planned, and it smells like fear wrapped in wool coats and gunpowder. You wander down the creaky hallway past doors with no locks, because keys are pointless when rifles decide who stays put. One guard hums a folk song under his breath. Another carves shapes into a chair leg with a bayonet. These men are bored, stressed, and very armed. The Romanovs, meanwhile, are trying not to fall apart. Alexandra's health is crumbling. Some say it's sciatica, others say it's guilt, or grief, or withdrawal from the morphine she's been prescribed for years. She writes letters to her relatives in Germany, though none will ever be delivered. She still signs things in Christ, still clings to an impossible idea that suffering means divine favor. Nicholas is not quite present. The man once titled autocrat of all the Russias now spends his days chopping wood in the garden and reading old military journals like they still mean something. He started writing a diary, yes, even now. His last entries are dry like weather reports. Had tea. Alexei coughed. Maria painted. 7 p.m. walked in yard. It's heartbreak by understatement. Little Alexei, the air is pale and thin, his hemophilia flaring up every few weeks. The guards carry him up and down the stairs like a delicate piece of furniture. He's always in pain, but never complains much. Maybe he's too tired. Maybe he's just used to it. At night, the family prays, sometimes in German, sometimes in whispers. It's the kind of quiet that aches. Candles flicker. Paintings are long gone. The floor creaks like it remembers better days. And all the while, the city around you sharpens like a knife. Yekaterinburg's churches are closing. The Reds have started executing counter-revolutionaries in the fields beyond town. One merchant was shot for owning too many shoes. The White Army is inching closer, and panic is blooming in the cracks. Some locals joke that the Romanovs are being kept as hostages to fate. Others suspect the guards are drinking more than usual. You spot one spitting on a crucifix before shoving it into a drawer. This isn't just the end of a family, it's the closing act of a world order. You feel it in the air the way you feel lightning before it strikes. The Romanovs are shadows now, ghosts, before they've even died. And you, unlucky traveler, are about to follow them through their final hours. Step lightly. The floor is thin. The end is closer than you think. The House of Special Purpose. It's a name that sounds like a Soviet-themed Airbnb, but it's far more sinister. You're inside now, and it's colder than you'd expect for mid-July. Damp, too. The kind of damp that seeps into wood, into fabric, into bones. The walls are thick and uneven, hastily whitewashed over peeling wallpaper, and there's a faint, ever-present tang in the air. Bleach and mildew. This was once a respectable merchant's house, 3 stories of creaking charm. But it's been warped into a trap with no elegant escape. The Romanovs don't call it that. They never refer to it by its new name. To them, it's just the house. Or sometimes bitterly, this place. Whatever warmth it had has been scrubbed away quite literally. When the family first arrived in April, the guards had already removed anything remotely comfortable, mirrors, rugs, even light fixtures. Furniture is sparse and brittle. Everyone sleeps on iron army cots, the windows painted over in thick white to block views both in and out. It's not just isolation, it's erasure. You trail your hand along the cold hallway banister, where flaking varnish gives way to splinters. A few paces down a set of stairs leads to the cellar. Don't go there yet. You'll get your fill soon enough. The layout is simple but oppressive. The entire top floor is locked off for guards only. The Romanovs live crammed into a few small rooms on the main floor, and one bedroom for the children. They share a single toilet that constantly clogs. The guards joke about it, of course. Nothing says the fall of an empire like imperial daughters waiting in line to flush twice. Maria and Anastasia are said to have scratched poems into the windowsills with hairpins. You lean in close, and yes, there's something there. Letters, names. A line of German verse that seems to trail off like it lost the will to finish. This house isn't just shelter, it's a diary. written in invisible ink. Historians still debate just how harsh their confinement was. Some guards later claimed the family had books, games, even a gramophone. Others insist it was brutal from the start, no privacy-limited food humiliation on a daily schedule. The truth, as usual, probably falls somewhere uncomfortable. Some days were tolerable, others less so. What's undeniable is how thoroughly their identity was stripped. The daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia had once worn tiaras that sparkled like falling stars. Now they wear shapeless skirts and wrap their feet in rags when their boots blister. There are no more maids to dress them, no tailors, no feasts. Their meals are dull, meager, often cold. Boiled potatoes, black bread, weak tea if they're lucky. Once they were served soup that still had feathers floating in it. The girls joked about it. It was either that or cry. And then there's the silence. It's one of the most oppressive things in the house. Conversation has dwindled to whispers. The children write letters they'll never send. Alexandra, ever the empress, still tries to maintain order, insisting on prayer discipline, proper posture. But even she can't hide how frail she's become. The stress has aged her 10 years in 10 months. She moves slowly now, her legs swollen, her back hunched, her eyes constantly scanning the faces of their captors for signs. Any signs. Nicholas, meanwhile, does what he can, which is to say very little. He's polite to the guards, too polite. He smiles when they mock him. He doesn't want trouble. He chops wood in the tiny courtyard with the careful desperation of a man who once ruled 150 million people, but now finds comfort in a splintered axe handle. He still signs his journal, Nicky, as if he's writing to an old friend who might rescue him. And then there's that pale blue room where Alexei spends most of his time. The boy's legs are failing again, joints swollen from the ever-lurking specter of hemophilia. He can't walk some days. He winces when moved. His mother dotes his sisters distract, and Nicholas sits beside him for hours, quietly reading old Russian fairy tales of czars and warriors and heroic sons who never bleed. Even the guards have started to feel the weight. Some refer to the family by name, not number. One reportedly offered the girls chocolate. Another refused to shoot a stray dog near the house because it made Alexei laugh. These little cracks of humanity are dangerous. In revolutions, affection is a liability. So the Commandant Yakov Yurovsky tightens control. He's recently replaced the more sympathetic guards with harder men, some drunk, some violent, all carefully selected. One of them reportedly asked, why not just shoot the whole lot now, and wasn't reprimanded. You linger in the room where the family eats. It's a mismatched table, nicked and scorched. Plates are chipped. The chairs don't match. There's a single dull spoon for every person. Meals are served at strict times. No seconds. No special requests. Once the bread was so stale, Nicholas cracked a tooth. He made a joke about it. No one laughed. The daughters still braid each other's hair. Tatiana has taken over as the de facto nurse. Olga writes poetry in a secret journal. Maria, reportedly flirtier, once tried to engage a guard in conversation. He was replaced the next day. Anastasia hides pencils in her boots and carves faces into the wood of her bedpost. Anything to leave a trace. A few relics from their past linger in quiet corners. A broken music box. A single embroidered napkin with a Romanov crest stained and fading. A child's sketch of the family hung crookedly on the wall with a bent nail. These aren't luxuries. They're memorials in real time. Outside the house, whispers grow louder. Locals gossip. Red soldiers drink and speculate. The White Army is advancing from the south, and there's talk, dangerous talk, that they might retake Yekaterinburg. That the Romanovs might be rescued. To some, this is unthinkable. To others, it's a terrifying possibility. But in the House of Special Purpose, the family doesn't know any of that for sure. They suspect things, of course. They're not stupid. They see the guards whispering. They hear footsteps at odd hours. They notice when locks are changed without explanation. But they also hope. Foolishly, desperately. Because that's what people do. You pause near the staircase again, that narrow flight that leads to the basement. It looks ordinary, but there's something off about it. A draft, maybe. Or the way your stomach flips when you glance toward it. Because the house may not look like a prison from the outside, but it was never meant to be one. It was meant to be the end. The longer you stay inside the House of Special Purpose, the more it begins to feel like time itself is peeling away thin layers of routine, stripped from what was once royal life, leaving behind something bare and strangely vulnerable. You walk the narrow corridor again, worn boards creaking under your feet, and peek through the half-closed door to the Romanovs' main quarters. This room used to host diplomats. Now it hosts a family of 7 trying not to fall apart. You watch them in moments that shouldn't be interesting, because it's in the dullness that their former world continues to disassemble. Tatiana sits on a stool sewing, but the thread keeps breaking. Olga stands near the window, hands clasped, pretending to look at something beyond the painted glass. They do this often. Pretend that the paint isn't there, that beyond it is something more than a fence and a man with a rifle yawning into his scarf. It's a slow unraveling, and the boredom is its own form of cruelty. Nicholas still maintains a sort of routine, rising early and dressing in a stiff military blouse, though the epaulets are long gone. He still bows to his daughters when entering a room, still kisses Alexandra's hand like they're attending an opera, not wasting away in a high-security holding cell disguised as a home. Even meals have turned theatrical. Breakfast is dry toast and weak tea. No servants, of course. Everyone helps serve imperial hands, used to signing decrees now, buttering bread with dull knives. The children eat slowly, carefully. No one talks much anymore, except to ask for the salt, which is usually missing. One morning you witness Maria gently teasing Alexei, nothing harsh, just a soft jab about his handwriting. He grins, then winces as his leg cramps again. The moment dies, and so does the laughter. Historians still debate whether the family was aware of the severity of their situation, whether they knew they were marked for death. Alexandra suspected it, certainly. She wrote letters filled with cryptic lines about martyrdom and his plan for us. Olga hinted at it in her poetry scribbled in the margins of torn pages. But Nicholas, he was more like a man waiting for a train that no longer runs. You pass a box near the wall, an old storage trunk the family brought with them from Tobolsk. Inside prayer books, a few silver spoons, hair combs, a stack of letters bundled with ribbon. Some of the letters have been reread so many times the paper's nearly translucent. Many are from Alexandra's family in Germany, never answered. She still reads them aloud sometimes, as if to remind herself she exists outside this room. She limps badly now, joints stiff with pain. Her doctors, former doctors, prescribed rest, but rest is all she has, and still it doesn't help. She spends long hours sitting near Alexei's bed, reading him psalms, braiding the girl's hair, or silently stitching embroidery that never seems to get finished. What you notice most in these small scenes isn't fear. It's resignation. The family's identity, one built on ceremony control and distance, has been gradually peeled away like wallpaper soaked and scraped. First the titles, then the entourage, then their space, now even their privacy. Guards occasionally burst in without knocking, searching for contraband. Last week they confiscated a pencil. a single pencil. Anastasia, never one to follow rules, keeps finding more. You catch her slipping a sliver of one under a floorboard after scrawling something behind a cabinet. Her rebellion is quiet, but pointed like a small dog that still barks when cornered. Once she carved a smiley face into the bedpost. It's still there. Even religion, their deepest anchor, has become muted. They still pray daily. Alexandra leads it, but the icons are fewer now, removed or confiscated. What's left hangs crooked on the wall, smeared with candle soot and finger streaks. The girls have taken to hiding tiny crosses in the hems of their skirts, as if fabricating a shrine out of thread will keep God closer. Meanwhile, Yurovsky and the guards are tightening the screws. The family used to be allowed time outside 15 minutes in the courtyard each day. Now it's 10, sometimes 5, sometimes none. The walls grow metaphorically smaller, but also literally. Furniture is moved closer to the walls to make room for inspections. Doors creak louder. The stairwells seem narrower. You start to feel it too, that claustrophobia that seeps in through the silence. You pause at a corner where a curtain once hung. It's gone now. The Empress had sewn it herself, trying to bring some warmth into the main room. Yurovsky removed it, citing security risks. The window behind it had already been painted shut. So what exactly was the risk? Something to do with light hope. Who knows? Even the girls' cats, brought all the way from their old palace, were taken away. One guard said they smelled. Another said they reminded him too much of home. Whatever the reason, their absence is felt. The family mentions them less and less, as though saying the names might make it worse. And then there's the peculiar matter of the watches. You notice one evening during a meal that every Romanov still wears a wristwatch. It's strange considering the circumstances. Why cling to time when it's clearly running out, but they wind them each morning methodically, as if that alone might rewind everything? A lesser-known historical tidbit. When the bodies were eventually discovered, many of the watches had stopped at exactly the same time, around 2:15 a.m. Whether that's when the bullets started flying, or simply when the glass shattered and the gears jammed, is unclear. But it's one of those eerie details that sticks to the walls long after the clocks themselves are gone. As you turn back toward the hallway, a low groan echoes from the pipes. Or was it the floorboards? Hard to say. The house groans often now, like it's getting ready to speak. But what could it possibly say that hasn't already been whispered? This is no longer just a royal family. It's 7 individuals, slowly, painfully being untethered from a world that no longer has a place for them. And tomorrow they'll be just a few hours closer to disappearing entirely. You find Nicholas alone now, seated at a small table near the window, not that he can see anything through the thick coat of white paint sealing the glass. He sits upright, still in his faded military tunic, still grooming his mustache with the same care he once reserved for imperial meetings. His boots are polished, though no one's inspected them in weeks. Every motion, every habit feels like he's trying to keep something alive, a shadow of authority maybe, or just dignity. You hover near him, and for a moment you wonder if he feels your presence. He doesn't flinch. He just breathes slowly, carefully. His fingers drum the tabletop in a silent rhythm, and beside him sits a dog-eared notebook. His diary. Still kept daily. Still painfully mundane. He picks up his pencil and writes, "Slept poorly. Tea at 8. Rain. Girls walked around room. Alexei tired." That's it. That's what the life of a former Tsar has become, fragmented notations in passive voice. As if describing someone else's day. Maybe it's easier that way. This was once Nicholas II, emperor and autocrat of all the Russias, crowned in a golden cathedral ruler of 1/6 of the Earth's landmass. Now he measures time in coughs and teacups. He used to receive visitors bearing diplomatic cables and jewels. Now his most frequent caller is the smell of cabbage soup leaking from the kitchen downstairs. Historians still argue whether Nicholas was simply unfit to rule or tragically unlucky. Some blame his passivity, his over-reliance on Alexandra and Rasputin. Others say he was caught in a tide no man could have turned. But sitting here now, it's hard not to see the weight of the crown still clinging to his shoulders long after the gold has gone. He's not stupid. He knows they're never going home. But denial, in his case, takes the form of orderliness. He trims his beard each Sunday with a dull razor. He washes his own laundry and folds it into precise stacks. His boots sit aligned beneath his cot soles, facing the wall, old military habit. When Yurovsky enters the room, Nicholas always stands. Always bows. It's instinct, not submission. You walk with him through his daily routine. He checks on Alexei, first gently patting his son's thin shoulder. Then he walks the perimeter of their small space, counting steps. Exactly 23 from one end to the other. Then back. Then again. Some days he carries a book, Pushkin-Tolstoy, Naval History. Others he just walks eyes low, murmuring to himself. You catch him whispering in French once. Maybe he's reciting old court speeches or prayers. The guards mostly ignore him now. Some call him Nikolai, others simply him. They no longer see a ruler. They see a worn-out man with calloused hands and a too straight back. One of them once joked that the Tsar chopped more wood in Yekaterinburg than he ever had orders in Petrograd. No one laughed. Sometimes Nicholas still tries to parent. He scolds the girls lightly when they bicker. He insists on clean nails before meals. He once told Anastasia to stop whistling indoors, calling it bad luck. She laughed. He didn't. It's these small collisions between emperor and father, between history and humanity, that start to blur the lines. You realize he's not really either anymore. He's become a ghost of both. The children still call him Papa, though his authority now extends mostly to asking them not to run indoors. Anastasia naturally still does. Once she skidded across the floor in socks and knocked over a basin. Nicholas raised his voice sharper than usual and immediately looked regretful. He patted her shoulder afterward. They didn't talk for the rest of the day. In the evenings, Nicholas reads aloud. Nothing grand fairy tales, mostly. Russian folk stories. One night it was Ivan the Fool. Another night the Firebird. He always softens his voice for the animals. He pauses for questions. And the girls, they sit eyes half closed, pretending for just a moment that the walls are gone. And they're back in the nursery at Tsarskoe Selo. One fringe theory, popular mostly among amateur historians, suggests Nicholas believed he'd be sent into exile rather than executed. That he pictured Switzerland or Denmark, perhaps even a small farm somewhere chopping wood, not as a prisoner, but as a gentleman. The fantasy is almost endearing, and of course, completely delusional. You notice the way his face changes when the guards speak to him in short, clipped tones. He flinches slightly, but never reacts. It's the trained stiffness of a man who once commanded armies, now taking orders from boys with dirt under their fingernails. He doesn't challenge them. He simply nods. But inside, something's changing. He's begun praying more, quietly, at odd times. Sometimes you catch him standing alone, eyes closed, lips moving. Not in desperation, almost in apology. For what? For losing the empire. For letting his family be dragged through this, maybe just for still hoping it might end differently. That hope, though, is thinning. A week ago, they were told they might be moved again. Alexandra asked if it would be to Moscow. Yurovsky smiled. That smile didn't reach his eyes. Since then, Nicholas has stopped asking questions. One curious detail you can't shake, he always carries a handkerchief. Always. Even indoors. Not for his nose, but clutched in his hand like a prop. It was a gift embroidered with gold thread by Olga years ago. The fabric is worn, the edges frayed. But he holds it during meals, during reading, even in sleep. It's the last soft thing he owns. There's a rumor, likely exaggerated, that Nicholas once carved a chess set out of soap while in captivity. No board, just the pieces. It's probably false. But you can almost believe it. The man before you is desperate for structure, for symbols, for any game he can still pretend to play. As night falls again, he sits by the lamp diary open. He writes rain again. Girls made toast. Alexei better today. Read from Lermontov. No mention of the tension thickening in the hallway. No mention of the voices whispering behind the doors. Just rain. Toast. A moment of warmth trapped in ink. He closes the book, stares at the painted window, and sighs. The Tsar is gone. What's left is a father, a husband, and a man bracing quietly for a knock on the door that will change everything. You find her near the stove, elbow deep in soapy water, humming something just off key. It's Anastasia, the youngest daughter, the trickster, the sharp-tongued spark that won't quite snuff out. She's scrubbing dishes like she's auditioning for a job she never applied for, sleeves rolled high, fingers red from the cold water. You watch her for a while. There's no real point to this chore, no visitors to impress, no social order to maintain. But the Romanovs have clung to a strange routine in captivity. It's the only thing that hasn't been confiscated. Anastasia scrubs faster when a guard walks past, but as soon as he rounds the corner, she smirks and sticks out her tongue at his retreating back. It's subtle, easy to miss, but it's also dangerous. And of course she knows it. She's always been the rebellious one, the imp her mother used to call her. Even in the luxury of the Winter Palace, Anastasia left footprints on upholstered chairs, hid frogs in boots, and stole pastries from silver trays. Now in this faded prison house, that defiant spark has dulled, but hasn't died. Not yet. She's the one who still makes jokes, still teases her siblings, still hums lullabies out of tune. It's her defense mechanism. Humor, mischief, irreverence. When the world crumbles, she mocks the rubble. Earlier this week, a guard found a tiny folded note tucked into the laundry. It was written in looping script, "We are still alive. The weather is dreadful. Please send chocolate. No signature, no date." But it didn't need one. Everyone knew who wrote it. Historians still debate whether Anastasia ever believed they'd truly die here. Some say she was naive, sheltered too young to grasp the stakes. Others argue she understood better than anyone that humor was her shield. After all, what do you do when you're a teenage Grand Duchess and the walls are closing in? You make fun of them. You trail her as she flits between rooms, quick-footed and sharp-eyed. She pauses to braid Olga's hair, then mimics the commandant's voice in a whisper so perfect it makes Maria choke on her tea. "Comrade Romanov, you are under arrest for excessive charm and illegal smirking." She bows deeply. Olga rolls her eyes. Later you catch her sketching something on a scrap of paper. 2 chickens wearing crowns, one labeled Mama, the other Papa. She folds it 3 times, tucks it into a book, and places the book just so on the shelf. Another secret. Another giggle waiting to happen. But the laughter is thinner now. The walls seem to absorb it. She used to sneak into the guards' quarters when they weren't looking, stealing matches or glancing at forbidden newspapers. Once she asked a young sentry if he had a sweetheart back home. He blushed so furiously that his shift was cut short the next day. His replacement didn't smile once. It's getting harder to be mischievous. The new guards are colder. The house feels tighter. Even Anastasia's jokes have started to land softer, like she's unsure if anyone's still listening. And yet, the moments persist. She and Maria, often inseparable, still make up songs at night. Nonsense verses. Rhymes about creaky floorboards, flat soup, and the unmistakable scent of boiled cabbage that clings to the walls like a curse. You spot one of her better inventions, taped to the underside of a drawer, a list of official rules for House of Special Purpose Living, complete with hand-drawn emojis. Rule 1. No smiling before tea. Rule 2. If you're going to cry, do it fashionably. Rule 3. The last one to the toilet gets cold water. There's something profound in the absurdity. The other children appreciate it. Even Tatiana, the most serious of the sisters, can't help but smirk when Anastasia pantomimes the family cat's supposed opinions on Bolshevik hygiene. He says we smell like sadness and boiled towels. But beneath the antics, you see the cracks forming. She's lost weight. Her eyes linger longer on locked doors. She no longer races down the hallway like she used to. Once you saw her tear a letter in half before finishing it. Not because it was wrong, because it was pointless. One day you follow her to the end of the corridor where a guard stands watch. She stares at him for a long moment, says nothing, then turns around and walks back, hands clenched, lips tight. There's something she wanted to ask. Maybe to plead, maybe just to be heard. No one speaks of the outside anymore, not in front of the guards. But Anastasia, being who she is, occasionally slips. When we leave here, she said once, I'm going to eat 3 cakes and take exactly 100 baths. Alexei asked, will they be chocolate cakes? She grinned, all of them. A pause, then softer, if we leave. You turn a corner and spot a small photo taped to the wall above her cot. It's old, grainy, folded at the corners. A family portrait from better times. Anastasia has drawn devil horns on her own head in pencil. Next to her name, she wrote, the cute one. It's gallows humor, and it's heartbreaking. Fringe theorists love Anastasia. They've built entire mythologies around her. Escape stories, secret tunnels, rescues by sympathetic guards. One woman in the 1920s claimed to be her swearing she'd survived the massacre. Others followed. All of them were proven false, or at the very least, unprovable. But it makes sense, doesn't it? If anyone were to escape, it would be Anastasia, the one who could charm her way past bayonets, the one who could vanish between shadows, the one who could turn a death sentence into a prank and make the guards forget to pull the trigger. And maybe that's why people needed to believe she survived. Because her spark, her grin, was the only part of this story that felt truly alive. But here now, she's still scrubbing dishes. Still humming out of tune, still cracking jokes that land just a little too late. She's not dead yet. But the house is working on it. And you, watching her retreat into her cot for the night, can't help but wonder what the world would have looked like if her laughter had made it out alive. It's late again. The lamps burn low, and the quiet has deepened into that strange midnight hush, where even the creaks of the house feel exaggerated. You move toward the bedroom, where Alexandra lies in her cot, motionless beneath a blanket of thick wool and heavier thoughts. The Empress no longer rises early. Her body is stiff legs, swollen heart tight with something more than just physical strain. Her ailments are real sciatica migraines, lingering fatigue, but they've grown roots in the soil of fear and guilt. These days, pain and conscience blur together like fogged glass. She doesn't speak much anymore, unless it's to pray. And even her prayers have become thinner, as if words alone are no longer enough to summon the strength she once found in faith. Still, each night, she clutches a well-worn Bible bound in fading red leather. Her fingers trace the pages more than her eyes do. She already knows the words. You sit with her in silence. The room smells of lavender oil and damp linens. There's a cracked icon above the headboard Christ Pantocrator brought from Tsarskoye Selo. And on the table beside her lies a folded handkerchief embroidered with the initials AFR for Alexandra Fyodorovna Romanova. She's still elegant in the way that older royalty can be, even when disheveled. Her nightgown is simple but spotless. Her hair, though streaked with gray and often pinned hastily, now still carries the faint perfume of rosewater. But the lines on her face, etched deeper by months of fear and loss, tell the real story. You'll remember this was once a woman who believed she spoke with the divine. That Rasputin, the mystic from Siberia, could hear God and by proxy save her son. In another time, another room, his name might still bring comfort. But here in this dim space, it only echoes regret. Historians still argue whether Alexandra's relationship with Rasputin was born of desperation or delusion. Some saw her as a mother grasping at miracles. Others whispered darker theories suggesting manipulation, spiritual obsession, even political sabotage. Whatever the truth, the result was the same distrust, disdain, and a dynasty with a rotten foundation. And yet she loved fiercely. Especially her children. Especially her fragile son, Alexei. You remember how she used to kneel at his bedside through endless nights of bleeding, pressing damp cloths to his legs, whispering stories, praying so hard her lips bled. That mother still exists somewhere in her, hidden behind layers of fatigue and morphine. Yes, morphine. It's one of the few luxuries the family has left. Alexandra has relied on it for years, originally for sciatica, then for sleep, then just for getting through each hour. The guards don't always allow it. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes they ration it out like candy. But when she gets it, she sighs not from relief, but as if stepping away from a burning building into slightly less heat. You hear her murmur something in German. It's a prayer, or maybe a memory. Her accent has softened with the years, but her roots still cling to the syllables. Her letters never sent are mostly written in her native tongue, addressed to distant relatives who've either abandoned her or can't help her. It doesn't matter. She writes them anyway. On her nightstand, you notice a small worn letter with a tear stain across the top. The edges are frayed from too many readings. It's addressed to her sister Minnie, the Danish queen. The ink has faded, but you can still make out the words, "If I do not write again, know that I have forgiven those who will not come." God sees all. She used to believe in divine justice, you think. Now she just hopes for quiet. Tatiana enters the room softly. The second daughter, tall, severe, ever dutiful, kneels beside her mother and checks her pulse with the precision of a field nurse. No words pass between them. Alexandra simply squeezes her hand once tightly, then releases. You watch as she closes her eyes again, and for a moment, you wonder, is she praying or pretending not to exist? Outside the room, the guards pace more often. You hear boots scrape on wood, the metallic clink of rifles shifting shoulders. Yurovsky's voice cuts through the hallway, once sharp-clipped, irritated. Alexandra doesn't stir. She's long past being startled. Another fringe account claims she once tried to bribe a guard with a diamond ring sewn into the lining of her coat. There's no proof, but it would be entirely in character, practical, desperate, oddly composed. She was never helpless, just running out of options. You notice something strange on the back of her hand. A faint outline, a cross drawn in pencil. The daughters do this too. Every morning they trace a small Orthodox cross on their wrists or palms, as if to carry a blessing into the day. Some of the guards find it amusing, others find it unsettling. Yurovsky has told them to stop. They haven't. She still leads prayer at mealtimes, her voice softer now but steady. The girls bow their heads. Nicholas murmurs along. Alexei, if he's awake, simply listens. The guards stand silent. The house for that brief moment feels like a chapel. A tired, broken one, but a chapel nonetheless. And when the prayer ends, so does the peace. Alexandra opens her eyes again and looks toward the door, not because she hears anything, but because she expects something. She always expects something now. A sound, a summons, a step that doesn't belong. She says little to the guards. When she does speak, it's slow and formal. Please inform the commandant my son needs water. The bread was stale again today. The chamber pot must be emptied. Every sentence is framed like a royal decree, though no one listens like they used to. There's a sadness in that, like watching a violinist still play long after the strings have snapped. Sometimes she speaks to God directly. You've heard her whisper it. If this is the trial you wish for me, let it not be in vain. It's not a plea. It's a negotiation. And that's what her days have become, a constant bargaining with silence. As you drift from her room, the house seems darker somehow. Not just from the fading light, but from something heavier. The kind of dark that feels layered, intentional. A darkness of decisions already made. Alexandra still believes in suffering with purpose. But the purpose is vanishing. The suffering, however, continues on schedule. The boy is barely moving today. You find him curled on his narrow cot legs, twisted beneath thin blankets, face pale and puffy, with sleep that wasn't restful. Alexei Nikolaevich, Tsarevich of all the Russias, is no longer the cherubic heir paraded on balconies or whispered about in courts. He's a shadow of that promise now, all sharp joints and soft groans. Hemophilia has returned, as it always does. His left knee is swollen again, an angry bluish mass under the skin that pulses when he breathes. Every movement is measured wincing. His hands grip the edge of the mattress like it's a lifeline. You sit beside him, and for a moment, he looks at you right through you, as children sometimes do. He doesn't speak, but his eyes flicker with something just short of curiosity. Maybe he's imagining you're a soldier, or a fairy tale, or nothing at all. In the Romanov household, his condition is the silent axis around which everything turns. Always has been. Even now, as the world collapses, his pain sets the daily rhythm. When Alexei is well, the family dares to smile. When he suffers silence, falls like snow, Nicholas still checks on him first, each morning kneeling awkwardly beside the bed with stiff joints. Alexandra hovers constantly, her hand never far from his forehead, his shoulder, his chest. The girls rotate in and out like clockwork. Tatiana reads aloud, Olga sings softly, Maria brushes his hair when he can tolerate it, and Anastasia, God bless her, still manages to make him laugh. But those laughs are rarer now, softer, as if even joy must tiptoe. Historians still argue whether the decision to keep the family together was merciful or foolish. Some believe Alexei's fragility was the main reason the family wasn't split or exiled earlier. Others think the Bolsheviks saw him as a dangerous symbol, one that might rally monarchist sentiment if left alive. Either way, it meant he too was condemned by blood and lineage. His condition, of course, was a royal secret for years, hemophilia. And the royal disease was passed down from Queen Victoria through Alexandra and into his veins like a quiet curse. You recall stories of bleeding episodes lasting days. Once he tripped in a carriage and couldn't walk for a month. Another time, a simple jostle dislodged a clot. and sent the entire household into days of whispered prayers and tightly clenched fists. Here in Yekaterinburg, there are no doctors, no painkillers, just cold compresses and nervous hope. You watch him stir now, shifting slightly. The pain makes him gasp. A guard hears the sound and frowns through the doorway. They don't like the noise. It reminds them of what's real. Alexei knows what's happening. Maybe not all of it, not the final plan, but enough. He hears the tones in his parents' voices. He feels the tension. Even at 13, he can sense when the adults are speaking around him, not to him. And yet, he doesn't ask questions. He simply exists, quietly. Sometimes with surprising calm. One of the guards, a young one with a patchy beard, once tried to talk to him during a brief courtyard visit. "You're not what I expected," he'd said. Alexei had smiled weakly and replied, "No one ever is." The guard was reassigned the next day. There's an odd, almost sacred air around the boy. Even the most hardened revolutionaries pause in his presence. Maybe it's the fragility. Maybe it's the legend. Maybe it's just that suffering in a child always strikes deeper. You notice he keeps a small wooden toy under his pillow carved by one of the guards, oddly enough. It's a dog crudely shaped, but worn smooth from handling. He strokes it often, especially at night, whispering nonsense to it when he thinks no one's watching. Another curious habit, he talks to the walls, not in madness, but in practice. Little speeches, imagined conversations. If I were in St. Petersburg now, I'd ride horses through the garden. Or I bet Papa still knows all the naval flags by heart. Once you caught him muttering, "I think Mama blames herself, but it's not her fault." And one evening, "If we go to heaven, do you think it will snow there too?" The pain makes him philosophical. His sisters try to keep him engaged. They play word games, read aloud. Maria once tried to teach him to knit. That lasted 15 minutes. Tatiana built him a chess set out of paper. He lost every game but insisted on finishing them all. Even when the pain surged, he kept playing. You wonder if he saw the pieces as something he could control? That's the cruelest part of hemophilia. There's nothing to do but wait. Wait for the swelling to pass, for the clot to dissolve, for the next bruise to bloom like ink under the skin. It turns every movement into a gamble, every laugh into a risk. And yet, he still tries to smile. One morning during breakfast, a guard spills tea and curses under his breath. Alexei giggles. Everyone freezes. The boy covers his mouth, then mutters, "You're not supposed to say that word." The room breaks. Even Nicholas smiles. That's what Alexei does. He opens brief windows in the fog. Fringe biographers like to dwell on the idea that Alexei might have lived if the others hadn't held him back, that the Bolsheviks might have spared a sick child. But anyone who's seen him here now knows better. He's already marked, not just by blood, but by symbolism. He is the future they're trying to erase. Even the furniture reflects this. His cot is lower to the ground. His shoes are never far from reach, though he rarely wears them. A chamber pot sits nearby because the stairs are no longer possible. Dignity bit by bit eroded. But not spirit, not entirely. At night he whispers prayers with his mother. His voice is thin but clear. Once he prayed for the guards. You wonder what Alexandra thought of that. He still dreams. You can tell by the way he twitches in sleep how his lips move silently, as if talking to someone else, someone far away, maybe in a palace with golden halls and summer gardens. A place he barely remembers, but still believes in. And just like that, you remember he's still only a boy born to rule a country, a boy betrayed by his blood, a boy caught in the gears of history. You watch him sleep, the breathing shallow but steady, the toy dog held close, and you wonder, will this be the last night his pain is just from within? The guards always look like they're waiting for something. They pace the hallways with restless energy, hands twitching toward rifle straps, eyes darting to doors as if expecting someone or something to appear and end the tension that's been building for weeks. You linger among them now, stepping through the soft stink of tobacco and boiled boots, and it becomes clear these men are not jailers in the usual sense. They're a patchwork crew, former factory workers, soldiers, revolutionaries, even a couple of drunks brought in because they needed bodies who could follow orders and stay mostly sober before sunrise. Some of them are young, too young. Their uniforms barely fit. Their boots are secondhand. One has a nervous tic that makes him blink every time someone says, "Empress." Another hums a lullaby when no one's paying attention. Not because he's fond of the Romanovs, but because it calms him down. And then there are the others, the harder ones. Thick-necked, quiet, eyes flat like pond water under ice. They don't talk much, they just watch. Some of them seem to enjoy it, this slow suffocation of an imperial family. Others are bored, numb, irritated by the ritual of pretending it's just another guard post. The shift changes are erratic. Some guards stay 12 hours, others leave after 3. There's no consistency, no comfort, just the ticking of clocks and the quiet tension of proximity. These men live only rooms away from the Romanovs. They smell their meals, hear their prayers. They know their footsteps and which daughter sneezes the most. It's Olga. You sit beside them at their makeshift break table, a stained plank on rusted sawhorses, where crusts of bread and crumpled cigarette packets form a kind of sad still life. They play cards. Not often. Not for long. No one can concentrate. There are whispers, always whispers, about the White Army, about new orders, about the odd looks Yurovsky's been giving lately. One night a guard named Kudrin mutters, "We should just get it over with." No one replies. But the silence feels like agreement. Some of them, just a few, start to form strange bonds with the family. A brief smile from Maria, a nod from Nicholas. Alexei, ever polite, once asked a guard his name and remembered it. That small gesture seemed to unsettle the man more than any threat could have. Historians still argue how deep these sympathies ran. Did some truly grow fond of their captives? Or were they projecting, grasping at human connection in a place designed to choke it out? Testimonies from years later are contradictory. Some claim to have wept after the killings. Others swore they felt nothing at all. You catch one guard staring at a sketch Tatiana pinned to the wall, a pencil drawing of flowers. He doesn't speak, just looks at it for a long time before tearing it down and folding it into his pocket. Why, maybe he liked it. Maybe he thought it was dangerous. Or maybe he couldn't bear to see something beautiful in a place meant to be forgotten. Another fringe detail there are reports that some guards kept diaries. Not many, and certainly not detailed. But little notes, fragments. One entry found decades later read simply, "The girl asked me about the sun. I told her I'd forgotten." It doesn't say which girl, or whether he ever remembered. The Romanovs refer to them differently. The tall one, the coughing one, the kind one. They speak about them the way animals in a cage might refer to their keepers, not with hatred, but with a kind of cautious observation. Once a daughter asked, "Do you think they know our names?" No one answered. You drift into the guard room late one evening and hear laughter. Not joyful. More like that hollow kind that spills out after too much vodka and not enough sleep. They're playing a game mocking the Romanovs' accents. One mimics Alexandra's German-Russian drawl. Another fakes a limp like Alexei. It's cruel, but it's also a coping mechanism. They're building armor out of ridicule, trying to dehumanize what they can't quite stomach. Yurovsky doesn't laugh. He just watches, takes notes. He's always watching now. There's one particular guard who never speaks. You try to catch his eye, but his gaze is fixed on nothing. He stands near the stairwell for hours, unmoving. People say he used to be an altar boy. Others say he killed a white officer's family by mistake. Either way, something in him is permanently locked shut. The house is wearing on them too. You see it in the way they slump during meals, the way their hands shake when lighting cigarettes. Some have nightmares. One murmurs in his sleep, "Don't open the door. Don't open it again." You start to notice the separation breaking down. The line between prisoner and captor is thinning. Both are trapped here. Both are waiting. The only difference is who still has boots on. Anastasia continues her small rebellions. Once she offered a guard a drawing, a cartoon of him tripping over a rifle. He laughed. But the next day, he wouldn't look at her. The moment had passed, and with it, whatever humanity he'd briefly touched. The strangest part. They almost never talk about the execution. Not directly. They skirt around it. Refer to it as the thing, or if it comes to that. No one wants to say the words. Maybe because saying it makes it real. Maybe because it would force them to look too closely at the people behind the names. At night, you hear boots shuffle past the children's room. One guard pauses. You can almost hear his thoughts. They're just kids. And yet, he doesn't stop the clock from ticking. He just walks on. So now you know this isn't just a tale of victims. It's a story of watchers of foot soldiers stuck in moral quicksand. Some of them will spend their lives trying to forget what they did. Others will lie. A few will tell the truth too late when it no longer matters. But for now they wait. Rifles cleaned, orders unclear, eyes flicking toward doors that haven't opened yet, but soon will. Very soon. You notice it first in the air. It's heavier now, closer, like someone turned the walls a few inches inward overnight. There's no structural change, of course. The house hasn't shifted. But to the people inside, the space is undeniably shrinking. The Romanovs' world has gone from palaces and trains to a cramped row of rooms barely wide enough for dignity. And it's still getting smaller. It starts subtly. Curtains disappear. Not stolen, not torn, just removed one by one under orders. The ones Alexandra hand-sewed are the first to go. The reason, security and a sort, says Yurovsky. That word again. Always that word. It's the universal key to every lock in this place. You're standing near a window that used to look out over a quiet street. You can still see the outline of the frame through the paint, where sunlight might have touched the floor. But now it's all just blank, pale white like snow frozen on glass. Olga sometimes pretends to see through it, narrating made-up scenes outside parades, warm rain, a street dog rolling in the dust. No one laughs anymore, but they let her go on. You wander from room to room, and every corner feels more compressed. The furniture's been rearranged, pushed back, packed closer. Items have disappeared, a chair a second wash basin, a worn footstool Tatiana used to read on. Gone. No explanation, no replacement. One guard muttered that the fewer comforts they have, the easier it will be. The Romanovs, ever polite, never ask where anything goes. They just note the absence in their own quiet ways. Alexei now balances his toy dog on a stack of books that used to rest on that missing stool. Anastasia draws on the backs of used envelopes instead of sketch pads. Nicholas sharpens pencils down to the bare nub. even as spares sit untouched in a confiscated drawer. There's less food now, too. Fewer trays, smaller portions. The meals arrive later, sometimes cold. Alexandra doesn't complain. She just tears the bread into smaller pieces and hands them out like a priestess at a dismal communion. Historians still argue whether this slow erosion was strategic or just the result of collapsing logistics. Were the guards intentionally starving them of comfort to prepare for the end? Or was it just the general decay of wartime supply lines, incompetence wrapped in malice? Perhaps both. As with most things here, cruelty and laziness look eerily similar. The courtyard visits, which once offered 15 minutes of weak sun, are now sporadic. Last week they were allowed out once. Tatiana looked up and whispered, "The sky is still blue," like she needed to confirm it. You notice how they've stopped talking about seasons. There's no next summer or when it snows again. They talk only in present tense, if at all. The windows, you realize, are now more than just blocked. They're symbolic. The Bolsheviks haven't just hidden the outside world from the Romanovs. They've erased it. A house with no view is not a home. It's a box. And a box is easy to carry. Or bury. Yurovsky visits more often now. He enters without knocking, flanked by silent men with notebooks and stiff posture. He asks short questions. Any complaints? Is the boy well? Do you need candles? He writes down their answers, but never looks up. It's clear nothing they say matters. Still, the Romanovs reply, carefully measured like supplicants before a god who doesn't smile. Maria once asked if the curtain might be returned. Yurovsky said, "We'll see." That was a week ago. Now she doesn't ask. Even the noise in the house has changed. Less conversation, less movement. The girls whisper more. Their footsteps are lighter. Alexei's limp has worsened, so the boards groan differently when he's carried. The guards listen to these sounds like notes in a song they've grown too familiar with. And it's not just space that's shrinking. It's time. Nicholas still writes his diary, but the entries are shorter. Rain, pain in Alexei's leg, girls sewed. No color, no reflection. Just flat facts, like trying to remember a dream you never wanted to have in the first place. You hear Alexandra mumble more often now, mostly prayers, but sometimes things you can't quite catch. Last night she whispered, "The walls are thinner." She didn't mean literally. She meant emotionally, psychologically. The illusion of privacy has vanished. One eerie moment, Anastasia started drawing a new cartoon, only to stop halfway, frown, and tear it up. "What's the point?" she muttered. No one disagreed. Even Rasputin's old letters, once folded and refolded like talismans, have disappeared from Alexandra's bedside. Maybe she burned them. Maybe she finally realized miracles aren't made for this kind of house. And then, something odd. One of the daughters, probably Olga, begins hiding things. Small things. Buttons, a needle, a coin, nothing useful. But you find them in strange places behind baseboards, under a loose floor tile tucked into the pages of a broken hymnal. Is it preparation, a nervous tick, or just an attempt to make the space feel like theirs again? You notice, too, that they all sleep closer together now. When night falls, the sisters drag their cots nearer, forming a kind of human perimeter around Alexei's bed. Nicholas and Alexandra sit in chairs until very late, staring at nothing. Once Nicholas stood up and walked the length of the room 8 times before sitting down again. Another detail, they've started whispering to each other in code. Old childhood languages, German mixed with French, English slang from their governess. Not to deceive the guards, but to reclaim something private, something untouched. But even that won't last. A few nights ago, a new guard was added to the rotation. He carries a notebook and says almost nothing. He doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. He just watches. Anastasia nicknamed him the Statue. He hasn't blinked at it. You begin to realize that the guards are also becoming part of the house itself, like living furniture moving walls. Their presence reshapes the space. The Romanovs walk differently when they're near. They speak differently, even breathe differently. This is what psychological pressure looks like. Not loud, not fast, just a slow, steady tightening. And in the middle of it all, a family once surrounded by gold now clings to cracked soap dishes and painted over windows. No gallows, no verdict. Just the walls pressing closer. And somewhere outside these rooms, decisions are being made. Step outside just briefly into the city that presses its gray weight against the walls of the house, and you'll find Yekaterinburg in midsummer, caught somewhere between boiling and boiling over. It's July 1918. The air buzzes not with cicadas, but with tension. The streets are packed with gossip ration carts and revolutionaries playing at police. The locals have learned not to ask too many questions, especially about the family hidden behind those tall fences on Voznesensky Lane. You drift through narrow alleys and cracked avenues where men speak in mutters and women count sugar lumps like gold. The revolution is supposed to be about equality, but nobody seems to be celebrating. The food is worse. The threats are louder. Even the sky seems tired of its own weather. And yet, everyone knows. Or at least they suspect. They know the Romanovs are inside that strange merchant house. Not officially, of course. The Bolsheviks say nothing concrete. But you can't hide the routine, the wagons that roll in with loaves of bread and cheap meat, the heavy boots posted at every entrance, the unmarked packages that come in and never come out. The city watches. Always watches. Some are sympathetic. You overhear an old woman murmuring near a stall, "The boy's sick, I heard. Still a child." They won't harm a child, surely. Her companion doesn't answer. Others are less forgiving. A local carpenter sneers when he passes the fence. About time someone dealt with the parasites. His wife elbows him, not in disagreement, but in caution. In Yekaterinburg, everyone listens, even the bricks. Historians still debate how much the local population knew or cared about the imperial family's fate. Some eyewitnesses claimed the Romanovs were pitied, even prayed for. Others insisted they were resented symbols of excess in a starving world. And then there were those who simply chose to forget, because remembering meant being involved. You visit a bakery near the edge of town where whispers are currency. One man swears he saw Tatiana through a crack in the fence, pale as milk and singing under her breath. Another claims to have spoken with a sympathetic guard who confessed the family would be gone by week's end. The baker rolls his eyes and slides him a smaller loaf. Dreams cost less than truth, he mutters. Out on the street, the red propaganda is louder than ever. Posters scream about enemies of the people about the White Army's approach. Names are written in crude Cyrillic letters on walls, then painted over, then written again. You see slogans like "No gods, no masters," and beneath them in smaller nervous handwriting, but maybe a little mercy. A crowd gathers at the edge of the central square. A speech is being given, something about unity and sacrifice. No one listens. A child cries. A dog barks. A man with a rifle shoos them off. But it's not just noise. There are real fears. The White Army is close, very close. And with them comes a question the Bolsheviks can't seem to answer. What do we do with the Romanovs' rumors drift through the taverns? One says the family will be moved again south, maybe. Others claim there are plans to put them on trial. But no one speaks of freedom, not anymore. That illusion died months ago. The Bolsheviks, meanwhile, are feeling the heat, not just from approaching armies, but from within. Moscow sends mixed signals. Some letters urge caution. Others hint that complications must be resolved permanently. No names, no commands. Just that thick, suffocating ambiguity revolutionaries seem to excel at. You peek inside the Bolshevik headquarters, an old office with peeling paint and a cracked clock that always reads 3:17. Papers everywhere. Telegrams flutter in and out. Yurovsky arrives twice daily now, face unreadable. He leaves with clenched jaws and fresh ink stains. There's talk that someone high up visited the house last night. Not a guard. Someone from Moscow. No one saw a face. Just the carriage wheels, mud-splattered and fast. Fringe accounts insist it was a courier bearing Lenin's final word, sealed and coded. Others say it was a decoy, that the real order had been given weeks ago, hidden inside a grain manifest or a children's book. Because why not nothing is ever what it seems here. Back on the streets, a child skips past the church, recently converted into a munitions depot. Her dress is too thin, her laughter too brittle. And behind her, a man in a black coat stares at the Ipatiev house. He stands there for 15 minutes, says nothing, then walks away. The house looms larger than anything in this city. Not in size, but in weight. It's the elephant in the room made of wood and barbed wire. Everyone knows what's happening. Everyone pretends not to. Yekaterinburg, once a sleepy mining town, has become the silent witness to a chapter no one wants to write. And yet, here it is etched into the cobblestones, folded into receipts, scrawled in chalk that fades before morning. And inside the house, the Romanovs don't see any of this. But they feel it. They feel it in the way the guards snap at each other more often now. In the rations that come late. In the sounds of trains at night and boots that don't match the regular shifts. They feel it when the piano goes unplayed. When the mail never comes. When someone coughs and no one moves. The outside world is closing in. Not with shouts or banners, but with quiet. Too much quiet. And you drifting between the house and the streets know what they don't. The rope is tightening. The city holds its breath. And somewhere beyond this night, a room is being prepared. They gather at night, mostly in silence, mostly without eye contact. The room smells like pipe smoke, damp wool, and the bitter tang of gun oil. Papers rustle, a chair scrapes, boots shift uncomfortably on the dusty floorboards. There's no formality here, no salute, no anthem, just the quiet weight of an irreversible decision bearing down on a handful of tired men. You stand at the edge of this circle, watching Yakov Yurovsky read from a folded note. It's not long. A few sentences, carefully worded. Not exactly in order, but not optional either. The kind of directive that isn't signed at the bottom, but bleeds implication from every line. No one interrupts. No one argues. They just listen. The date is July 13th, 1918. They still have a few days officially, but Yurovsky, who has barely slept in weeks, is already moving into a different mode. He speaks like a man pulling a lever. Mechanical, focused, hollow. He needs a team, not just guards. Executioners. The word isn't spoken aloud, but everyone in the room hears it. Loud and clear. A few avert their eyes. One man, Medvedev, big hands, bad teeth, just grunts and spits into a tin cup. Another mutters a joke about bad luck. No one laughs. You glance around and see what kind of men have been chosen for this task. Not elites, not ideologues, not even the worst of the worst. Just men. Some young, others not. Some barely literate. One's already drunk. One stares at the wall like he's trying to will it to open. Yurovsky hands out rifles next. Mausers. Efficient, reliable German-made. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Foreign weapons for a domestic problem. He inspects each barrel, checking the mechanisms like he's preparing farm tools, not instruments of royal extermination. Historians still argue over how carefully the firing squad was selected. Some say Yurovsky vetted them personally, choosing men he thought could follow through without hesitation. Others believe it was slapdash, whoever happened to be nearby, sober enough and angry enough to pull a trigger. What's clear is this, once chosen, none of these men could walk away. Each man is sworn to secrecy. There's no signature, just a quiet nod, a cigarette offered, a silence accepted. Some will later claim they didn't know what they were signing up for, that they thought it was a transfer or an escort or, absurdly, a rescue operation. But they know. You can see it in their posture, the sudden stiffness, the careful avoidance of certain words. It's the knowledge of a coming act so final, so intimate, that it leaves no room for misunderstanding. Yurovsky gives each man a title. Not rank exactly, just a task. You take the father, you cover the boy, you make sure none of the girls stand. It sounds clinical, like assigning chores. But this isn't laundry or firewood. This is logistics for death. There's talk of ammunition, not enough for everyone to fire twice. They'll have to be precise. Headshots, close range, no delays. If someone hesitates, the others must correct. That's the word Yurovsky uses, correct. It makes your stomach turn. One man raises a hand and asks hesitantly, "Do we really kill the boy?" It's not a challenge, more of a plea. Yurovsky doesn't flinch. All of them, he says. All. Without exception. A silence follows that feels like an earthquake with no sound. You can't help but wonder what each man is thinking. Do they see the family in their minds, the girls brushing their hair, Alexei smiling weakly, Nicholas writing in his diary, Alexandra lighting candles with trembling fingers? Or do they see the empire, the suffering, the hunger, the soldiers who died barefoot, the streets full of corpses and empty promises? Maybe they see both. One guard, Ermakov, red-faced, always half-drunk, offers to lead. I'll start with the mother, he says a little too loudly. No one responds. Later, he'll be the one most disturbed by how messy it all becomes. Fringe accounts claim some of the chosen men were promised rewards, watches, medals, food rations. There's no hard proof. But given the hunger, the tension, the chaos of the revolution, it's not impossible. What better way to secure silence than with a bribe disguised as a thank you? Yurovsky ends the meeting by reminding them not to speak to each other about this again. Not before, not after, not ever. The men disperse slowly like oil on water. No one says goodnight. As they leave, you catch one man pausing outside the house. He stares up at the darkened windows, ones long since painted over, and whispers something. Maybe it's a curse. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just his daughter's name. He doesn't stay long. Back inside, Yurovsky sits alone with a half-empty teacup and his thoughts. He makes a list of final preparations, who gets which weapon, where to station the backup guards, how to explain the gunshots to the neighbors. He's efficient, thorough, dead-eyed. There's no joy in it. No hesitation either. This is his role now. He believes, at least outwardly, that this act will serve history. That by cutting the head off the Romanov body, the revolution will finally be clean, a whole permanent. Of course, history doesn't work that way. Outside, the night is strangely quiet. No rain, no barking dogs. Even the wind seems to have taken a night off. The stars hang above Yekaterinburg like cold judgment. And somewhere just a few blocks away, a girl stirs in her sleep, dreaming of snow and music and the sound of a garden fountain she hasn't heard in over a year. She doesn't know it yet, but men are preparing to kill her. Not because they hate her, but because someone decided the world would be neater without her name. It comes on silent paper in careful code, with just enough ambiguity to allow for denial if the world ever comes asking. The telegram arrives late in the day, July 16th, 1918. The ink is fresh, but the decision has aged in dark corners for weeks. It's addressed to Yurovsky and the Regional Soviet in Yekaterinburg, but no names are used, no signatures, only the authority of absence. Because in this revolution, what isn't said speaks loudest. You lean over Yurovsky's shoulder as he reads it. No gasp, no furrowed brow, just a long, exhausted blink. The finality of it isn't in the message itself. It's in how little it says. There are 3 core lines paraphrased through layers of cryptic phrasing. Ensure the operation is completed without delay. Prevent the escape of the subject and his family. Take measures for silence and discretion. That's it. No specific date, no names, no mention of bullets or basements or daughters. And yet everyone who reads it understands exactly what it means. Yurovsky folds the telegram carefully, like he's tucking away a grocery list. But his hands tremble just a little when he sets it down. Then he goes to work. Because now, it's no longer preparation, it's execution. Historians still argue whether Lenin personally authorized the Romanov killings. Some believe the telegram came straight from the top, passed through Sverdlov's hand with a nod. Others say it was a local decision born of panic over the advancing White Army. But there's a third school of thought, perhaps more chilling, that the vagueness was intentional. Plausible deniability baked right into the parchment. Whatever the truth, the result is the same. The Romanovs will not see another sunrise. Yurovsky begins dictating orders. He tells the guards the family is to be relocated for their safety. It's a lie, of course, but it works. The guards nod relieved. Some had suspected what was coming. Others had hoped this moment wouldn't arrive. Either way, they go quiet. He inspects the weapons again. Mauser pistols, Nagant revolvers, bayonets. There aren't enough for every man, but that's not the point. Not everyone will shoot. Some are backup. Some are insurance. Some are there simply to keep the others from flinching. Next, he calculates the timing. The White Army is closing in. They're less than 100 miles from the city. If they capture Yekaterinburg and find the Romanovs alive, the Bolsheviks lose not just a war symbol, they lose control of the narrative. That can't happen. And so midnight is chosen. Or just after. The late hour ensures fewer eyes, fewer ears. But not silence. Not exactly. The walls are thick, but not invincible. Which is why Yurovsky arranges for a nearby truck to run its engine loudly during the operation. To mask the sounds. Just in case. You feel a chill at that. This is not a crime of passion. This is procedure. A checklist. He meets with the execution team in a dim side room. Goes over final logistics, positions, target assignments, ammunition checks. He tells them to aim for the head and heart. Kill fast. Kill clean. That's the goal. A few of them nod too quickly. Others don't speak at all. One looks like he might vomit. No one backs out. Then come the side tasks. 2 men are ordered to prepare the truck that will transport the bodies. Others will gather sulfuric acid and firewood for body disposal. A few will scout the woods east of the city for a burial site. Not a marked grave, of course. The plan is to erase, not remember. Fringe accounts claim someone suggested a more formal execution, a trial of some kind, a public moment. but Yurovsky shut it down. There's no time. The message is clearer this way. The guards assigned to the Romanovs are instructed not to mention anything to the family. The story remains relocation. They'll be told to pack. Alexandra is to prepare Alexei for travel. They're advised to rest. You drift upstairs and see Alexandra brushing Alexei's hair. She's gentle, humming a tune one Rasputin used to hum. She doesn't know it's the last lullaby. Or maybe she does. Nicholas writes a brief diary entry before bed. His last. It reads, "The weather was hot. Drank tea, walked. Alexei felt better." Olga and Maria read aloud. That's it. His empire began with a coronation that killed over 1,000 people in a stampede. It ends with weak tea and short sentences. Meanwhile, Yurovsky adjusts the furniture in the basement room, moves a few chairs, opens the windows, then closes them, lights a lantern and watches the shadows it throws. He's testing the angles, making sure nothing goes wrong, that the space is tight but manageable, efficient. Later, he paces the hallway like a man trying to tire out his guilt. At some point, he sits alone and writes his own notes. A sort of log. A letter to the revolution, if you like. It will be revised later. Cleaned up, the messier details removed. But tonight it's raw. Honest in a horrifying way. One line stands out. "I took all measures to avoid cruelty, but such measures are not always effective." You don't know whether to laugh or scream. Outside, the city is asleep, more or less. A few windows flicker with candlelight. Dogs bark at shadows. Somewhere a train groans on its rails, not knowing it carries no one who can stop what's about to happen. You walk past the guards' quarters and hear one humming a lullaby. The same one Alexandra hummed earlier. The tune floats through the cracked door, soft and strange. And then, an odd moment. Yurovsky pauses near the Romanovs' room. He listens. There's silence inside. No prayers, no voices, just breathing. He doesn't knock, just walks on, because he already knows tomorrow morning there will be nothing left to say. The floorboards creak differently tonight. You feel it the moment midnight crosses the threshold, July 17th, 1918. There's a shift not in the air, but in the tone of the air. As if the walls themselves have leaned in curious, holding their breath for what they already know is coming. Yurovsky is awake. Boots, laced tight gloves on pistol holstered. He doesn't yawn, doesn't stretch. He simply stands listening to the faint murmurs of the house. He can hear the guards adjusting rifles in the other room, the soft clink of metal on wood, the careful hiss of nerves being swallowed whole. Downstairs in the basement, chairs have been arranged again. The room is ready. Almost. You drift into the Romanovs' quarters, and for a moment, it's just still. No one's moving yet. Alexei is asleep, or pretending to be. The girls are whispering in low tones, something about which dresses to wear. Nicholas lies on his cot, eyes open, staring into that blankness where ceiling meets silence. Then footsteps, slow, heavy. It's time. The guard knocks once. No hesitation. The door opens, and Yurovsky enters. He's calm, formal. His voice is quiet but clear. "You are being moved for your safety. Please dress. You will wait downstairs." There is no protest, not even a question. They've heard this line before every time they were moved from palace to confinement. It's the same script. They know their roles. Alexandra nods and gently rouses Alexei. His joints are stiff. He groans. Nicholas helps him into his tunic with care, fastening each button like it's part of a sacred rite. The daughters dress quickly in silence. Maria folds a handkerchief into her sleeve. Olga clutches a small pillow. Tatiana checks the cross sewn into the lining of her blouse. Anastasia hides something, maybe a note, maybe a prayer inside her boot. There's a fringe account that says one of them tried to smuggle a jeweled pendant under her corset that night. It's probably true. The girls had sewn many of their family's remaining gems into their undergarments for safekeeping months earlier. In the end, those jewels would become shields and curses. Yurovsky waits just outside as they gather their things. Nicholas insists on carrying Alexei himself. His son clings to him, silent face pressed against his shoulder. The boy knows something is wrong. He just doesn't know how wrong. As they move through the hallway, the lamps flicker. The girls walk in a tight cluster, skirts rustling, breath shallow. Alexandra leans heavily on Tatiana's arm. She's dressed in black, always black. You trail behind them, your steps almost weightless compared to theirs. The guards escort the family like shadows, present close but impersonal. Faces are stern, unreadable. Most avoid eye contact. One crosses himself quietly before descending the stairs. The journey down is slow. Every board groans, every step echoes. You feel time stretching as if it wants to buy them a few more seconds, but even time has limits. They reach the basement. Yurovsky motions for them to enter a small, dim room near the back. Its cluttered storage boxes pushed to the side, a few dusty chairs arranged hastily in a line. A single electric lamp dangles from the ceiling, its light dull and yellow. The walls are bare brick. The windows, tiny and high, are shut tight. Nicholas sets Alexei down gently in a chair. Alexandra sits beside him, hands folded tightly. The daughters cluster near the wall, as they've done in so many photographs, shoulder to shoulder, almost instinctively arranged. There's a half-awkward pause, as if they're waiting for a photographer to appear and say, "Smile." Instead, Yurovsky clears his throat. "You'll wait here," he says evenly. "We'll bring the truck shortly." Nicholas asks for chairs for the girls. Yurovsky gestures. A few more are brought in, shoved hastily into the room. The family sits. The guards shift. One man paces, fingers twitching toward his belt. The silence is dense. One of the daughters whispers something. Anastasia, maybe. Nicholas gently pats her hand. Alexandra adjusts her son's collar. Tatiana closes her eyes just for a second. And then the last arrival, more guards. Too many for an escort. Yurovsky returns this time with a paper in hand. His voice is louder now, clipped strange. He says, "Nikolai Alexandrovich, in view of the fact that your relatives are continuing their attack on Soviet Russia, the Ural Executive Committee has decided to execute you. No trial, no plea, no ceremony. Just that word, execute." Nicholas barely has time to respond. Some accounts say he managed a single phrase. What others claim, he turned to his family and whispered, "They know not what they do." The gospel in his mouth until the last moment. The shooting begins immediately. A sharp, thunderous blast in a room far too small for such violence. Pistols crack, smoke billows, screams erupt. You don't even have time to process it all. Bullets ricochet off walls. The girls cry out. Nicholas falls first, a clean shot to the chest. Alexandra slumps sideways, hand still gripping her son's knee. The guards panic. Some fire wildly. One man closes his eyes before pulling the trigger. But this isn't the end. Not yet. Because the girls don't die instantly. And the boy, fragile, broken, precious, keeps breathing. And already the basement is filling with smoke, blood, and horror. But for now, here in this moment, the shooting has just begun. And no one, not the family, not the killers, not even history will ever be the same again. It's quieter than you'd expect. After the first thunderous volley, there's a kind of stunned silence. Not the clean clean quiet of completion, but the disoriented hush of men realizing that what was supposed to be simple has just become a nightmare. The Romanovs didn't all die at once. The first shots hit Nicholas in the chest, toppling him backward like a rag doll. One bullet enters his heart. His head hits the wall with a dull thud. Alexandra gasps, a reflexive, almost maternal sound. She's next. A shot to the side of her head sends her slumping sideways in her chair, still holding Alexei's hand. Her body doesn't twitch. But then things go wrong. Because the girls are still sitting up. Because Alexei is still breathing. Because bullets are bouncing off bodies like rain on steel. You hover near the smoke, trying to understand. It takes a moment to realize what's happening. The girls are wearing their jewels. Literally. They had sewn diamonds, emeralds, rubies, some of the finest remaining relics of the Romanov fortune, into the linings of their corsets and underdresses for safekeeping. Now, in the worst twist of cruel irony, they act like makeshift armor. The bullets don't penetrate. Not all of them. Tatiana shrieks. Olga slumps over, only wounded. Maria stumbles, then cries out. Anastasia, blood in her hair, scrambles to her feet. For a terrible instant, it looks like she might escape. The guards panic. They hadn't expected this. They'd been told it would be clean, precise, over in seconds. But now it's a scramble of shouting and reloading. The room fills with smoke. The lamp swings from the ceiling like a pendulum in hell. Some guards shoot again, closer this time. Others curse and run for bayonets. One man vomits into the stairwell. You look at Alexei. He's still seated, still breathing, wide-eyed and silent. A bullet has grazed his cheek, but he's not dead. Not yet. Not even close. Yurovsky shouts something about finishing it. Bayonets now, he yells, voice cracking. It's not a command anymore. It's panic. Historians still argue about the exact sequence. Who fell when? Which daughter died first? Whether the jewels were known beforehand or came as a deadly surprise. Some reports claim the girls screamed for their mother even after she was clearly gone. Others say they just cried out random words, "Please no God." But they all agree on one thing. It was chaos. You watch one guard jab his bayonet forward, and it bounces off a corset. The blade hits a jewel-encrusted panel and slides away like it struck a board. He swears and stabs again. This time it sticks. Blood soaks the bodice. Maria gasps. Another girl, likely Olga, tries to crawl toward the wall. A guard kicks her back. Shoots, misses, shoots again. Her hand twitches. Then nothing. The floor becomes a battlefield. You hover above the scene, dizzy with horror. The smell is overpowering: gunpowder, blood, sweat, burning wool. Smoke thickens the air like soup. The walls drip with fragments of shattered bone and teeth. The bodies are slumped in tangled shapes, but none of them look peaceful. They're not lying in repose. They're crumpled, curled, clinging to each other, even in death. Anastasia, remarkably, is still moving. She's been shot in the torso, but somehow she pulls herself behind a fallen chair. A guard sees her, walks over, raises his weapon. She looks at him and says nothing. The shot echoes like a door slamming shut. Alexei is last. Yurovsky approaches him. The boy is slumped now, blood at his mouth, his eyes barely open. He blinks slow. There's no defiance, no prayer, only pain. Yurovsky doesn't hesitate this time. He fires twice. The boy falls still. And finally, it's over. Or so they think. Because as the smoke settles and the men lower their weapons, they realize the room isn't just full of corpses. It's full of consequences. One guard collapses in a corner, sobbing. Another runs to the hallway and leans over a bucket. Medvedev wipes his hands on his coat and mutters that they should have just burned the place down. Fringe accounts claim one of the guards tried to take a ring off Alexandra's finger but couldn't, her joints had swollen. He snapped it off. Later he lost it. Yurovsky stands still in the center of it all, pistol still raised, arm trembling. He doesn't speak, doesn't blink. He just stares. The lamp above swings back and forth like a pendulum in a slow-motion clock, throwing shadows over the walls that look like ghosts trying to climb out. And they might be. Because the horror here isn't just that a family died. It's how. A room full of the last threads of a 300-year dynasty, killed not in royal defiance or public spectacle, but in confusion, panic, and blood-soaked terror. You look around at the bodies, the twisted limbs, the eyes that no longer close, the smoke that hangs like a judgment. There's no reverence, no last words etched in history. Just this a lie about relocation, a room too small and too many bullets. And outside, the truck engine is already rumbling, because the bodies will not rest here. They still have a journey ahead. You follow them down the stairs again, but this time they don't walk. The bodies are dragged. Two men grab Nicholas by the arms, boots thudding against the steps as his body is hauled like cargo. Alexandra's neck slumped in a twisted heap, her head lolling at a wrong angle, pearls scattered from her gown. The girls are more difficult, not because of their weight, but because of their clothes. Blood-soaked silk clings to the floor, catching on nails and splinters. One by one, they're pulled up, dropped, repositioned. Alexei, small and fragile, is carried out by Yurovsky himself. He cradles the boy like he might still be sleeping. Maybe that's just for show. Maybe it's habit. There's no ceremony, no reverence, just blood and boots and the sour scent of death clinging to every nail in the floor. Outside, the truck waits in the alley behind the house. A flatbed with high sides lined with straw as if it's transporting livestock. The engine is running. Loud, a mechanical cover for the sounds of murder. Smoke pours from its tailpipe, curling into the dark like a signal the sky refuses to answer. It's still night. Just after 2:30 a.m., the city of Yekaterinburg is quiet. Except here. Yurovsky barks orders. The bodies are loaded in the order they were killed. Nicholas first, Alexandra second. Then the children, one by one, heaped together like a grim sculpture. Their arms tangle, heads tilt. One slipper falls off a foot and lands in the mud. No one notices. But you do. You also notice the detail the others missed. Olga's eyes are open. A guard curses, leans in, and slams the butt of his rifle into her skull. It cracks audibly. Her eyes stay open. The guard shudders and turns away. Someone lights a lantern to better see the stack of corpses. Bad idea. The light reveals what everyone wants to ignore. The mouths half open, the pinkish froth still on Alexei's lips, the blood still seeping slowly from Maria's dress. Historians still debate whether the guards were ordered to dispose of the bodies that same night or whether Yurovsky made that decision on his own. Either way, the goal is clear: no graves, no trace, no legacy. The Romanovs must vanish, not just from politics, from memory. The truck groans as it lurches forward, creaking under its load. Two guards ride in the back, gripping the sides, rifles clutched tight, as if they expect the dead to rise. The route winds eastward out of town and toward the Koptyaki forest. You follow behind your feet, barely touching the road. It's a strange procession, more like a midnight trash run than a royal funeral. The wheels hit ruts. The bodies jostle. A head rolls to the side. The youngest daughter, maybe Anastasia, maybe Maria, ends up on top, her face, skyward hair soaked in blood. There's a strange noise from the truck bed, like a moan. One guard leans down. Nothing. Maybe air escaping a wound. Maybe something worse. He lights a cigarette with a shaking hand and doesn't look again. Halfway there, the truck breaks down. Of course it does. The weight, the heat. The road too soft from recent rain. The engine sputters, then dies with a hiss. You can almost hear the revolution laughing at the irony. Now the men must unload the bodies. Again, they lay them in the grass, muttering curses. Someone kicks the wheel in frustration. Another pulls at the truck's engine, swearing in Russian. A few step back and just look. It's the first time some of them really look. And what they see unnerves them. These weren't monsters, or gods, or symbols. These were just people. Twisted, broken, bloodied people who once brushed their teeth, tied their shoes, worried about homework, and politics, and biscuits. And now they lie here, faceless in the moonlight, waiting to be buried like secrets. Fringe accounts say one of the guards started praying. Loudly. The others told him to shut up. Eventually, they fix the truck barely. The bodies are reloaded, straw scattered over them like it might erase the blood. The journey resumes. The forest is ahead now, tall, silent pines looming like sentries. This is the kind of place designed to forget things. It swallows sound, memory, and light. Perfect for what comes next. They stop near a clearing known as the Four Brothers. It's remote, marshy, already marked in someone's mind as suitable. The digging had started days earlier. A pit rough and shallow, maybe 5 feet deep. Not enough. Not nearly. The men begin to unload the bodies again. They drop them this time less careful, more frantic. The forest feels alive with judgment. The air is thick with mosquitoes and guilt. One body snags on a branch. Another rolls partway down the slope. Nicholas lands face down in the mud. A guard tries to flip him, slips, and lands hard on his own elbow. No one helps. You feel the rhythm of the night speeding up. They want this over. But there are complications. The pit is too shallow. The bodies don't fit well. The girls' clothes are too stiff from dried blood. Some begin to bloat. One leaks fluid onto the guard's boot. He screams. Yurovsky, furious, calls for acid. Yes, they brought acid, sulfuric, in jars, to destroy the faces, the identifying marks, to make this untraceable. One by one, they pour it over the bodies. Skin bubbles. Bones hiss. The air fills with a smell that will haunt these men until their last breath. You'd think that would be the end. But they're not done. The plan changes. The pit isn't safe enough. Too shallow, too close to the road. They must move some of the bodies again. So they burn them. Yes, fire too. Gasoline. Dry branching. They remove 2 of the children, Alexei and 1 sister, and drag them deeper into the woods. There they build a new pit. Burn the bodies. Scatter bones. Even in death, the Romanovs are not allowed to rest together. When it's finally over, when the last body has been hacked, burned, or buried, the men stumble back to the truck, filthy, sick, silent. The sun is rising now, pink and pale. Birds chirp in the distance. A new day has begun, and the Romanovs are gone. Not royal, not remembered, just gone. There's a moment brief, weightless, where Yurovsky simply stands in the doorway of the now empty basement room. No bodies, no noise. Just the stink of cordite blood and burnt cloth curling into the damp morning air. The chairs are still there. A skew knocked over. One has a broken leg. There's a dark stain on the wall where Nicholas fell. Another pools near the center, thick and brown, slowly seeping into the wood, like history refusing to stay on the surface. And Yurovsky, executioner, turned administrator again, walks into the center of the room with a clipboard. Yes, a clipboard, because it's time to write the report. You follow him as he crouches near one of the chairs, examines the floor, makes a note. He measures distances, checks cartridge casings, counts bullets, marks locations. This isn't guilt, it's logistics. Because if anyone asks later, he'll need the numbers to match the story. He writes something quickly: 9 bodies executed, 2 buried separately. Procedure deviated slightly due to unforeseen complications. That's one way to describe an hour-long bloodbath. He's already editing, already sanitizing. The details that might raise eyebrows, those will be gone. The bayonet stabbings, the moaning girls, the panic trimmed out. The only thing left will be the version the revolution can live with. And yet, even now, something about his posture says he knows it won't be enough. He calls in a few of the guards to help scrub the floor. That's right, scrub. Not paint, not seal, just water rags and sheer willpower. The room becomes a sick echo of its former chaos, a place where the very walls seem to twitch in memory. One man refuses to enter, says the air isn't right. Another, younger, simply faints at the sight of a bit of bone lodged between floorboards. They work all day. Someone tries to whitewash the brick walls, but the blood keeps seeping through. It's like the room remembers. A carpenter is brought in to repair the door frame damaged during the shooting. He doesn't ask questions, just hammers nails his face pale, his fingers trembling. Before leaving, he crosses himself twice, mutters something in Old Russian about cursed ground. Historians still argue over how detailed Yurovsky's original report was before revisions. The most widely circulated version, written later for the Bolshevik Central Committee, reads more like an efficiency memo than a confession. It glosses over the children, focuses on enemy elimination, barely mentions the girls by name. But the early draft, the raw one, allegedly included more. Names, mistakes, the jewels, the panic. That version never made it into the archives. Fringe theorists insist a carbon copy still exists somewhere, buried in a private collection, or maybe it was burned like the bodies. Either way, the official record is as whitewashed as the basement walls. Later that evening, Yurovsky sits alone in a small office. The sounds of the city leak through the cracked window cartwheels, a vendor shouting distant boots. Life continues, already. He rereads the telegram from Moscow, the original authorization, then folds it, places it in an envelope marked for archive, and seals it with wax. Then he makes a second copy. This one is cleaner, shorter, easier to swallow. Because he understands something vital now. If the revolution is going to survive, the truth must be manageable. You trail him as he walks back through the house, past the Romanovs' rooms, past the empty cots and half-washed linens and teacups still on the shelf. He stops once near Alexei's cot, just briefly. There's a dent in the pillow, still shaped like a boy's head. He doesn't touch it, just looks, then moves on. Downstairs, he gives more orders. The Romanovs' belongings are to be cataloged. Trunks, books, jewelry, letters. Anything useful goes to the state. Anything sentimental burned. One of the guards finds Alexandra's diary and begins reading it aloud in a mocking voice. Yurovsky snatches it from his hands. Enough. But he doesn't destroy it. Not yet. Because some things are valuable, even if they're covered in blood. Meanwhile, the basement continues to change. New boards are nailed down over the worst stains. Buckets are emptied. Windows sealed. By tomorrow, it will look like an ordinary storage room. But it won't be. Even the guards know that. One refuses to go near it after dark. Another insists he heard footsteps down there, bare feet, he says. Small ones. Fringe rumors begin almost immediately. Whispers, speculations. Some say one of the girls survived, that a guard let her go, that she was hiding in a shed when the bodies were moved. These stories spread not because they're true, but because people need them to be. Because the reality is too much. Too fast, too ugly, too final. Yurovsky sends a message to Moscow, confirming the task is complete. He chooses his words carefully. The entire family has suffered the same fate as the head. Nothing flowery, nothing gory, just bureaucratic death, phrased like a shipment notice. The reply comes quickly, acknowledged. We thank you for your duty, that's all. No medals, no celebrations, just acknowledgement. Outside the sun sets, the people of Yekaterinburg sit at dinner tables, light candles, scold children mend socks. A few pass by the tall wooden fence outside the Ipatiev house, glance up, then quickly away. They know something happened. They just don't want to know what. And inside, in that cleaned-up basement, history is already being rewritten. One bucket of bleach at a time. It starts with the gunshots. Loud, abrupt echoing in the tight brick of the basement, like thunder trapped in a matchbox. But the thing that no one ever really explains, the part history papers try to gloss over, is what happens after the first volley. The part that doesn't fit into a single sentence or a neat timeline. Because once the initial chaos settles, once Nicholas and Alexandra fall, once the first wave of fire has blasted through dust and bone, there's a pause. And then the real horror begins. You watch as smoke chokes the room. Visibility drops instantly. It's not cinematic, no clear lines of sight, no synchronized movement. Just men coughing and confused, waving pistols blindly through haze and shouting over each other in a panic. Several bullets ricochet off the brick walls. One guard ducks too late and gets grazed in the arm by his own comrade. Another tries to switch from revolver to bayonet, but drops both in the rush. The room is a mess of elbows and gun barrels, and too many boots not knowing where to stand. Someone shouts, "They're not dying," a phrase that will echo for decades. Before, the jewels sewn into the girls' corsets, meant to protect family wealth, now protect their hearts. Literally, bullets deflect. The guards didn't expect this. No one did. Maria is still gasping. Tatiana clutches her stomach. Olga's eyes flutter open. Anastasia somehow is screaming now, whether from pain or horror or something deeper. No one can tell. What was meant to be a clean execution has turned into a grotesque disaster. Yurovsky steps forward furious. His voice cuts through the smoke like a blade. Use your bayonets, and so they do. You stand still as the men surge forward. No strategy now, just brute force. One thrusts a bayonet at Olga's chest, but it catches on, something doesn't go in. He stabs again. It hits bone. She cries out, a high-pitched hoarse sound. He backs away, horrified. Another guard, Ermakov, drunk and sweating, swings wildly at Maria. His bayonet tears through fabric, but glances off something hard. He curses, punches her in the face. Blood spatters across the wall. The girls try to scramble. Not to fight, just to move, to get away, to make it stop. But there's nowhere to go. Tatiana collapses. Anastasia crawls behind a trunk and is dragged out by her ankle. One guard says later she looked him straight in the eye. He didn't aim, he just fired. Historians still debate whether she died then or later or somewhere in between. Some accounts say she moaned for minutes after the final shot. Others say she was the last to go. Alexei remains in his chair, bleeding slowly from multiple wounds. He hasn't moved, not a word, not a sound. His face is slack, unreadable, like his body is already somewhere else. Yurovsky walks to him and fires point blank. It still doesn't finish him. The boy is dying the slowest death. Another guard finally fires into his head, a final mercy that took far too long to arrive. And now, the room goes silent again. Not truly silent, though. The walls still hum with echoes. The blood still drips thick, rhythmic, like rain hitting meat. The stench is now unbearable. Cordite burning wool excrement. One man flees the room to vomit into a corner. Yurovsky, ever the manager, orders the bodies checked. One by one. Pistol to skull. Double shots. Make sure. It's not efficiency. It's desperation. Because nothing went as planned. You glance down at the floor. It's soaked, sticky black red, gleaming in the lamplight. Puddles where Alexandra fell. A long smear where Anastasia tried to crawl. Bits of cloth, teeth, hair. Someone steps on a rosary. The lamp swings overhead. No one dares stop it. The shadows it casts look like dancers or demons. The guards begin dragging bodies away, but it's slow. The corpses are heavier than expected. Some are tangled together, limbs, crossed fingers still interlocked. One guard tries to separate Alexandra from Alexei. It can't. Their hands won't come apart. Fringe theorists later claim one girl gasped while being moved, that her eyes fluttered, that a guard had to finish her with a final blow behind the shed. No one can prove it. No one can disprove it either. Which is why those stories never die. Even in death, the Romanovs resist clarity. You look to the walls again. They've absorbed more than blood. They've absorbed memory, energy, pain. There's one phrase scratched faintly into the brick near the door. It's German. Roughly translated, here lived, suffered and died. No one knows who wrote it. Some say Yurovsky added it later. Others say one of the girls carved it with a hairpin in her final hour. But here's what you do know. This room was never just a basement. It was the closing act of a dynasty. A theater of silence shattered by bullets and screams. A place where history ended not with speeches or swords, but with choking, smoke-wet boots and a scream that didn't stop until the walls learned to mimic it. You don't expect them to move. Not after that. Not after bullets have torn through flesh and the room is painted with silence. But they do. The daughters, some of them, don't die right away. You're back in the basement now in the lingering haze, and there's movement. A twitch, a gasp, a shiver that runs through the pile of what should be corpses. Anastasia jerks first, or maybe it's Maria. It's hard to tell. Their faces are swollen, hair matted to their cheeks. But one girl lifts her head slowly, shakily, eyes glassy and stunned. The guards freeze. She's still alive, someone whispers, voice raw with disbelief. And then chaos again. A bayonet flashes. A second shot rings out. A man lunges only to miss and stumble, his boots slipping in blood. Another guard slaps him upright and grabs his pistol. Historians still argue whether this part of the massacre was planned at all. It wasn't clean. It wasn't quick. It was an improvisation in horror. Why were the girls still breathing? Because of jewels. The Romanov daughters had sewn precious stones, diamonds, rubies, emeralds into the linings of their bodices and corsets. A desperate act of preservation. They believed even in exile that their family's wealth might someday matter again. But no one expected the gems would become armor. The bullets hit fabric, not flesh, ricocheted off sapphires, skipped past emeralds. It turned what should have been a few seconds of execution into a cruel extension, minutes of noise screams, and the horrifying necessity of finishing the job. Yurovsky later said the girls were difficult. That's the word he used. Not alive, not resistant, just difficult. Tatiana's corset was like chainmail. 2 bullets didn't go through. Maria was shot once, then bayoneted, then shot again. Olga tried to rise. She was shot again, then again. And Anastasia. Here's where the stories split. Some say she died instantly, in the second volley a headshot delivered in panic. Others say she rolled under the bench, wounded but alive, and moaned for hours. One version has her regaining consciousness after the guards left the room, only to be shot again later in the forest, when her faint cries reached someone's ears. There's even a report, unconfirmed, likely fiction, that she begged, "Please don't. I can't breathe." It doesn't matter whether it's true. What matters is that everyone believed it could be. Because this wasn't execution, it was butchery. And what should haunt you most is how methodical it became. The guards began checking each girl one by one, not for signs of life, for jewelry, for valuables. Fingers were pried open, dresses cut, rings removed, necklaces pulled from still warm throats. Some guards pocketed what they could. Others handed everything to Yurovsky. He kept most of it in a satchel. Later, he'd hand it over as evidence. As if items soaked in blood could be turned in like library books. You drift near the far corner of the room where Alexei had fallen. The boy's body is now slumped sideways, awkwardly tangled with a blood-stained pillow. He didn't die quickly either. The jewels in his shirt had protected him too, but not well enough. A guard stabbed him in the chest, another in the face. When he still didn't move, someone fired a bullet into his ear. And that's how the heir to the Russian Empire was erased, piece by piece. You try not to look too long at the floor, but it's hard to ignore the details, the half-open eyes, the fingernails cracked from grasping, the quiet finality of mouths that never finish their screams. Even the bullet holes in the wall look like wounds that won't close. Fringe accounts claim that one guard, after stabbing a girl, collapsed and began sobbing. "I didn't know she was alive," he said. "I didn't know." Another allegedly refused to enter the room again. He stood at the top of the stairs, shaking, repeating, "It took too long. It took too long." They all expected to be done in a few minutes. Instead, it dragged out for more than 20 minutes of screaming, of slipping, of missed shots, of flesh torn by blades that weren't sharp enough. And then silence. Again. But different this time. Not just the silence of death, but of something broken deeper than bones. Something that would echo in the minds of those men forever. Some drank for days afterward. Others went silent. One was institutionalized a year later. No one came to visit him. Yurovsky's notes from the night are matter of fact. Dry, mechanical. He mentioned some resistance. That's it. No elaboration, no reflection. Just a line break, then a note about moving the bodies. Because in the revolution, there's no time to grieve. Only time to erase. The bodies were carried out, one by one, down the stairs, across the hall, past walls that had heard prayers only hours earlier. And the room was washed down, scrubbed, like it was just another mess. And maybe that's what makes it most terrifying. Not just that the girls didn't die right away, but that when they finally did, no one looked back. The silence after the violence doesn't bring peace. It brings a thick, pressing stillness, like the house itself is too stunned to exhale. Blood has seeped into every surface of the basement, down into the gaps between the bricks, into the grain of the wood, into the memory of the walls. And now it's cleanup time. Not mourning, not reflection, just cleanup. You float among the men assigned to the task, some executioners, others summoned later, under orders, not questions. The first thing you notice is that no one speaks above a whisper. They move like people trying not to wake something. The floor is slick, too slick. Every step risks a fall. The blood congeals fast in the summer heat, but in patches it stays warm and wet. One man slips and lands hard, his palm slapping into the mess near Alexandra's last position. He recoils, stumbles out of the room, and doesn't come back. You stay. Because you need to see this. Because history isn't just about who died, it's about who cleaned it up. They begin with the bodies. Nicholas first. Still wearing his officer's tunic, the buttons blown, crooked from the bullet impacts. He's heavier than expected. His boots leave streaks on the floor as they drag him out. Next, Alexandra. Her body is stiffening. Her mouth is open like she died mid-sentence. Her fingers are still clutching a tiny gold cross. One guard tries to take it. Another slaps his hand away. The girls come next, more complicated. Their dresses have hardened with blood and smoke. The fabric sticks to the floor. It takes 2 men to lift each one. Olga, Maria, Tatiana, Anastasia. Their faces are altered. Bayonet wounds, bullet holes, bruises. One has lost a shoe. Another is missing 3 fingers. The men try not to look. Alexei is last. His body is curled like he fell asleep. But his face, his small, ruined face, is a silent accusation. Historians still debate whether the Romanovs were all dead when they were carried from the basement. There's a persistent theory, never quite proven, never quite disproven, that one of the girls was still breathing. That a faint moan escaped her as she was loaded into the truck. If so, no mercy was shown. Her story ended the same. Now the room is empty, of bodies anyway. But the horror lingers. The cleanup begins in earnest. Buckets of water, old rags, weak bleach. It's like trying to mop a battlefield with a handkerchief. The walls are stained. The floor is black in patches. Someone throws sawdust over a particularly slick area, as if this is just a butcher's accident. Yurovsky is watching everything. Not helping, just supervising. He's taken off his coat. His shirt is soaked with sweat. His notes are blood-splattered. One man stops and says, "We'll never get it all." He's right. Fringe reports those tantalizing, half-believable sources claim that months later, after the Whites retook Yekaterinburg, they found pieces still in the basement. Bits of bone, strands of hair, a fingernail. Enough to prove the story, not enough to make it whole. The guards tasked with this job are promised silence, anonymity, perhaps protection. But they know deep down that what they've done won't leave them. Not really. One of them, a man named Pavel, stares at the bloody handprints smeared across the doorframe. It's small. Maybe Maria's, maybe Anastasia's. He wipes it once, twice. The mark remains. He pours water over it, scrubs with a brush, still faintly visible. He swears under his breath and walks out. Yurovsky inspects the room again that afternoon. The smell is still sharp iron mold smoke. He orders the window boarded up, has the chairs removed, the bullet holes patched. Someone brings in fresh lime for the floor. It mixes with blood and forms a strange pink sludge. Later he files a report, all remnants removed. Room returned to condition. He signs it with a flourish, but the room knows better. The truck, meanwhile, rattles down forest paths, bodies bouncing in the back like cargo with no destination. The men inside are tense, armed. The smell is impossible. One wraps a kerchief around his face. Another opens a flask and drinks deeply. They've been told to dig, to burn, to erase. That's all the revolution wants now. No trace, no relics. Just the disappearance of a family who used to rule the land. Back at the house, someone finds a piece of jewelry that had fallen under a cabinet. It's a diamond brooch crusted with blood. The guard turns it over in his palm, then pockets it. Doesn't tell anyone. a different man finds a torn corner of Alexei's notebook in a dresser drawer. Just 2 lines remain. Had tea. Legs hurt. Mama prayed again. He burns it without reading more. The White Army arrives too late. By the time they step foot inside the house, the walls have been scrubbed, the floor re-washed, the room locked. One soldier peels back a corner of the rug and finds a faint bloodstain. That's all. They know something happened here. But it's not enough. There's never enough. The Yekaterinburg house continues on for a few more years. First a base, then a symbol, then a burden. Eventually the Soviets tear it down, brick by brick. Not because it's old or unstable, but because they're afraid of what it remembers. They think if the building is gone, the story might fade. But you've been there. You've walked across that floor. You've heard the shots. You know better. They begin in silence. They always do. The cleanup crew, some of the same men from the execution, others newly enlisted for the task, gather at the edge of the forest clearing. It's the dead of night. July 17th has bled into the 18th. The Romanovs are dead, but the problem of their bodies remains. Because this can't just be a killing. It has to be a disappearance. They stand around the open truck bed, the canvas peeled back, revealing the heap of corpses, entwined, limp, blood-soaked, and grotesquely fragile now that the violence has settled. No one says a word. The only sounds are the whirring mosquitoes and the chug of the truck's motor still idling behind them. Yurovsky gives the first order, unload them. Start with the man. Nicholas II, former emperor of all the Russias, is dragged from the pile like firewood. His coat is stained nearly black. His face is bruised and slack. One of the guards takes a long look at him and whispers. He looks small now. They place him on the forest floor. Then Alexandra. Then the girls one by one. The order doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what comes next. They brought sulfuric acid, glass bottles, a metal container, rubber gloves hastily scavenged. The goal is to mutilate, to destroy identifying features. Yurovsky made it very clear in his last meeting, no martyr relics, no burial site to become a shrine. But things go wrong immediately. They pour the acid onto the faces, first starting with Nicholas. The smell is indescribable. A mix of rot chemical burn and something that makes the back of your throat close. The liquid hisses on contact, sizzling through skin and cloth, and in places down to bone. The guards recoil. One retches in the bushes. Another swears loudly and covers his face. It doesn't matter. They keep going. Alexandra's body is next. Her face is turned upward. The guard hesitates. For a moment, it looks like she's just sleeping, mouth open, slightly lips parted, still clutching the cross that wasn't pried from her hand. He douses her with the acid anyway. The jewels make everything worse. Those same stones that protected the daughters during the execution now explode under the acid's heat. Tiny bursts. One diamond cracks loudly. Another jewel embedded in Tatiana's corset actually burns a hole through the fabric and into her ribs. The smoke changes color. Yurovsky steps back. The fumes are overwhelming. Historians still debate whether this method was pre-planned or a desperate improvisation. Official records say it was necessary, that only chemical destruction could ensure the Romanovs would not be idolized. But some believe it was something else. Guilt. Rage. The final cruelty. Then they start the fire. Dry wood. Gasoline. A shallow pit. It's all ready. They lay 2 of the bodies, Alexei and one of the daughters, separately deeper into the woods. The rest will go into the original grave. These 2 burned. Erased more completely. The flames crackle high into the branches. The heat is instant, the smell beyond description. One guard says later that the trees cried. that the birds flew away and never came back. A lie, probably, but a fitting one. They stir the fire with sticks, watching flesh blacken, clothes shrivel, bone crackle. At some point, one of the girls' skulls splits open. The sound is like a branch snapping. Someone runs. Someone laughs. A manic, awful laugh that ends in coughing. And all the while, Yurovsky records everything. Not with a camera, with notes. Acid applied. 2 bodies burned, remaining buried in shaft, clean, dry, sanitized. He marks how deep the grave is, around 6 feet. How long the fire took to burn through muscle. What materials were used. How much gasoline remained. Because this isn't just concealment. It's a report. The revolution must have records even for its darkest acts. By morning, the pit is filled, covered, a few pine branches tossed over the top. There's no marker, no stones, nothing but disturbed soil that smells like chemistry class and something worse. A few feet away, the fire has burned low. They rake through the ash with sticks, teeth, bone fragments, a bit of Alexei's boot. They collect what remains, dump it into a smaller hole, cover it, stomp the ground. Done. Or so they think. Yurovsky tells the men to speak of it to no one. That if they are ever asked, they will say the Romanovs were transferred east. That they're alive, well in custody. They nod. But no one really believes the lie, not even the one saying it. One man carves a small mark into the bark of a tree before leaving. Not a name, just an X. Years later, it will guide searchers back. Another guard keeps a single cufflink, still crusted with blood. He hides it under a floorboard in his house. His son finds it decades later and throws it into a river. Because some things don't want to be kept. You watch them drive back into town. No one speaks. Yurovsky lights a cigarette with a shaking hand. His gloves are stained. He throws them into the bushes, then lights another. Back in Yekaterinburg, the house is quiet. The basement is drying. The mop water is black. Someone boards up the windows. A new lock is added to the door. From the outside, nothing has changed. And that's exactly the point. The plan was never just execution, it was erasure. But the land remembers. The trees remember. And someday someone will dig. And the silence that followed the gunfire will have to explain itself. It doesn't take long for the rumors to begin. You would think the secret of such a brutal execution might hold for a while, at least a few months. After all, there were no cameras, no public spectacle, no grave marked with a name. Just 10 or so men, a handful of conflicting memories, and an official silence so thick it echoed. But no. Within days, Yekaterinburg begins to whisper. The Romanovs gone, but not seen leaving. No train, no truck, no confirmation. The guards say nothing. The house is sealed. The windows shuttered. And you can't hide an entire imperial family behind a nailed-up fence without people asking questions. The first ones to notice are the locals, women who sold bread to the guards. A boy who swore he saw smoke rising from the woods. A priest who walked by the house the morning of July 17th and said the air tasted like ash. You float through the market square as 2 vendors talk in hushed tones. One says the Tsar was moved, another says he was shot. A third older woman leans in and whispers, they killed the boy too. The sick one. She clutches her rosary like it might bite her. By the end of the week, everyone knows. They don't know how or where, but they know the truth in that quiet, unmistakable way that spreads faster than fire. The Romanovs are dead. The Bolsheviks scramble to control the narrative. Moscow releases a carefully worded statement: Nicholas Romanov has been executed. His family has been moved to a safe location. The wording is surgical. Only Nicholas is confirmed dead. The others, ambiguity. Why? Because even in death, the Romanovs are dangerous. A murdered Tsar might be tolerable. A murdered boy, a murdered empress, 4 murdered princesses, that's a different story. And so the Kremlin opts for delayed disclosure. A slow leak. Let the shock spread gradually. Let the public imagine exile, not extinction. But not everyone buys it. The White Army is advancing fast. Just days after the murders, they take Yekaterinburg. Soldiers storm the Apatiev house. They go room by room, note by note. And when they reach the basement, they stop. The blood is still there. Scrubbed, yes, but not gone. Dried rivulets along the baseboards. A cracked brick under the window. A small tuft of hair in a corner, matted and sticky. One officer kneels and whispers, "They were killed here." They bring in investigators, journalists, foreign advisors. One former royal guard touches the bullet holes and weeps. Theories emerge instantly: how they were killed, how many shots, who lived longest. Someone claims to find a tooth. Another swears he saw Alexei's boot print in the mud outside. There's no proof, but the evidence of absence is overwhelming. And here's where the legend begins. Because the Soviets buried the bodies in 2 locations, because the burial was rushed and sloppy, and because the cleanup was riddled with mistakes, the world starts to believe someone survived. Maybe not all, but one. Maybe Anastasia. Maybe Alexei. You follow a group of white officers into the forest. They've come with shovels and prayers. They know roughly where to look. There are maps, vague witness testimonies. That tree with the strange bark. The rock someone swore was a marker. After 2 days of digging, they find nothing. Not a body, not a bone, not even a fingernail. It fuels the fire. The Romanovs, it seems, vanished. And so the imposters begin to appear. First in small towns, then across Europe. Young women claiming to be Anastasia or Maria. A boy in Siberia who limps and says he is Alexei escaped through the kindness of a drunken guard. Fringe believers argue, why not? The execution was chaotic. The basement was full of smoke. Couldn't one girl have slipped away? Couldn't a guard have smuggled her out? Historians still debate this with half-hearted sighs. Most agree no one survived. But the myth is indestructible. It's born of guilt, longing, and the human need to believe that tragedy might occasionally blink. You walk through Paris, 1920s, and see newspapers with headlines, "Anastasia found in Berlin. Society ladies gather for tea and discuss the new claimant's resemblance." In New York, a silent film dramatizes the family's last hours, glamorous, romantic, far from the truth. Back in Russia, the Soviet government remains tight-lipped. No photographs, no grave, no names. Just the suggestion of a transfer. In Yurovsky's later writings, he's more candid. He admits the whole family was executed, that the daughters died hard, that Alexei lingered. But these writings are private, circulated quietly among party historians. It isn't until 1926, 8 years later, that the USSR finally admits, yes, the whole family died that night. No remorse, no ceremony. Just a fact dropped like a pebble into water that barely ripples. But by then it's too late. The world has moved on, or tried to. The Romanovs have become ghosts of an empire of faith of family. Their real faces are replaced by fantasies. And the truth, the hard, bloody truth of that basement in Yekaterinburg gets papered over by fairy tales and conspiracy. And maybe that's why the myth never dies. Because the truth is too ugly, too hot, too real. And the world, as it often does, chooses the prettier lie. You stand in the woods again, only now it's decades later. The trees are older, taller, but quieter somehow, like they've been holding their breath since that night. The ground has shifted, weathered, eroded in places. But beneath the soil, the secret still lingers. It's 1979, and two amateur historians, Alexander Avdonin and Geli Ryabov, are standing over a shallow dip in the earth, staring at nothing. Except they know what's under it. They've spent years researching, quietly, obsessively. Avdonin has pored through Yurovsky's personal papers, whispered conversations, unfiled reports. Ryabov, a filmmaker and investigator, connected dots the Soviet state desperately wanted unconnected. Together, they believe they found the Romanovs. But they don't have permission. This is still Soviet territory. The state line is, there is no grave. End of discussion. So they dig anyway. Secretly, quietly, with garden tools. You watch them work in near silence under a canopy of trees that once flickered orange with firelight the night the bodies were burned. The dirt is heavy, packed with time and silence. It takes hours, but eventually a shovel clinks against something that isn't earth. A bone, then another, a partial skull, and a girl's shoe. They cover the site, back up, hearts racing. They don't take anything, not yet, just photographs, notes, the hope that someday this can be spoken aloud. But that day will not come for another 12 years. Because in the Soviet Union, even bones are political. Ryabov tries to publish what they found. He's silenced, fired, told to recant. He backs off. Avdonin goes silent too. They keep their secret like it's a cursed object, carefully hidden, always watching over their shoulders. And so the remains stay buried, still unrecognized, still waiting, until the Soviet Union collapses. The year is 1991. Suddenly the walls are gone. The files, once sealed, start leaking. Historians, journalists, scientists begin asking questions that were previously fatal. And finally, the truth surfaces. The grave is unearthed again. Officially this time. What they find is sobering 9 sets of remains. Nicholas, Alexandra, Olga, Tatiana, Anastasia, or is it Maria and 4 servants? But something's missing. 2 bodies, Alexei and one of the daughters, gone, vanished again. Theories explode. Were they buried elsewhere? Burned, hidden, moved later by panicked guards. Historians still argue about it. In the meantime, science takes over. DNA testing confirms identities. Mitochondrial DNA from living relatives, including Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, is matched. Bone by bone, the Romanovs are confirmed. At least, most of them. But the myth won't die that easily. Because without all of them, there's always a crack for fantasy to slip through. Anna Anderson, perhaps the most famous of all Anastasia imposters, is already dead by now. But in her wake are dozens more. One woman claims she escaped through a trap door. Another insists she was rescued by a sympathetic soldier and smuggled into Romania. None of them are believed. But belief isn't the same as wanting it to be true. Even now, in a world of forensics and databases and genetic markers, the question, what if one survived, still feels oddly comforting. You return to the grave now marked, cleaned, memorialized. A Russian Orthodox cross stands nearby, quietly weathering the wind. Tourists leave flowers. Some cry, others take selfies. It's not a pit anymore. It's a pilgrimage site. Across Russia, attitudes shift. The Romanovs are no longer just monarchs, they're martyrs, symbols of innocence, victims not of history, but of ideology. The narrative reshapes them into saints, particularly Alexei, the hemophiliac child whose entire life was lived under the weight of doom. In 2000, the Russian Orthodox Church canonizes the Romanov family not for their politics, but for the way they died. Quiet, faithful, together. Not everyone agrees with the sainthood. Secular historians bristle. Survivors of Tsarist oppression scoff. The church outside Russia had done it years earlier, but now inside the country, it becomes official. Icons are painted, candles lit. And suddenly the same man who was once Nicholas the Bloody is now Saint Nicholas the Passion Bearer. History bends like that. In 2007, the last two bodies are finally found. A few kilometers from the main grave, just bones, scattered, burned. But science doesn't lie. It's Alexei, and probably Maria. Now the puzzle is complete. And yet the ghost of that basement, the screams, the bullets, the chaos, refuses to settle. Because the final mystery isn't whether they died. It's how the world let it happen. You drift through modern Moscow, past churches, gift shops, apartments. No statues of Nicholas here. No museums dedicated to Tatiana's embroidery or Olga's poetry. But in a small chapel near Yekaterinburg, people pray. Not for justice, not for answers, just for peace. And maybe that's the most haunting part of all. That peace, real peace, never came. Not for the Romanovs, not for Russia, not even for the forest, where the earth still remembers exactly who lies beneath it. Time moves forward, but the basement doesn't. You return there now, in the early 2000s. The Apatiev house is long gone demolished in 1977 by Soviet order. The official reason it had no historical significance. The unofficial one, it was attracting attention. Pilgrims, whispers, people leaving flowers near the gates, citizens lighting candles and praying at the walls as if the souls inside hadn't already screamed their last into the brick. Brezhnev himself approved the demolition. He didn't want the Romanovs remembered as people. He wanted them forgotten as symbols. But history, annoying, persistent history, doesn't obey orders. Even after the house was razed, the ground remembered. Tourists kept coming. Locals whispered about strange dreams. Some said they saw lights at night. Others heard knocking beneath their feet. The area was fenced off for a while, then ignored. But the memory wouldn't fade. And so in 2003, construction begins on something new. Something that admits the past without quite apologizing for it. Something meant to sanctify what couldn't be erased. They call it the Church on the Blood. It's a grand name, and the building is no less grand. Gilded domes, white walls, tall spires. A cathedral that towers over the same soil that once soaked in the blood of a fallen dynasty. It opens in 2003 with prayer pageantry and politics. Thousands gather for the dedication. Priests chant in Old Church Slavonic. Choirs sing. The president attends. And in the crowd are people holding icons, not of saints from centuries past, but of Nicholas, Alexandra, and their children. Not Tsar and Tsarina, not former rulers, but holy martyrs, canonized by the church, sanctified by death. You walk through the building. There's a museum now. Glass cases with photos of the family. Anastasia holding a dog. Alexei in a sailor suit. Alexandra's prayer book. Fragments of their lives reconstructed in soft light. Visitors walk in silence. Some cry, others kneel. Even if you don't believe, it's hard not to feel something. Because the church isn't just a monument. It's an act of redemption. Or maybe revision. Maybe both. And beneath its altar, deep underground, is a small chapel. It marks the exact spot where the basement once stood. They call it the Altar of Martyrdom. Candles line the walls. A single wooden cross leans at an angle as if humbled by what it presides over. People kneel here sometimes for hours, not just Russians. tourists from everywhere. Some whisper prayers. Others say nothing. One woman clutches a photo of her own daughter while staring at a portrait of Olga Romanov. Their eyes are nearly the same. Fringe theories still linger. Always will. Some insist the Romanovs weren't murdered here. That it was a double. That the children were smuggled out and lived anonymously. That the Soviet records are lies. That DNA was faked. But for most, the argument has moved on. Not whether it happened, but how to live with it. You leave the chapel and step back outside. The sun hits the golden dome and flashes across the square. Children run across the pavement. A pigeon lands on a bench. Normal life inches above old death. Nearby, a small gift shop sells candles, postcards, and icons. You pick one up, it's a painted image of all 7 family members standing together, clothed in white, their expressions soft and knowing. Alexandra holds a cross. Alexei has his hand in hers. It's peaceful, clean, unlike that basement. But people need this version, this symbolic one. Because the real story, the blood, the screaming, the bullets that wouldn't kill, that is too heavy for bedtime prayers. You walk through the square. Someone is playing music from a phone. A slow Russian folk song. The lyrics speak of winter of waiting, of voices you can't forget. And for a moment, the weight of the place is too much. You remember the chair with the broken leg, the bullet hole that wouldn't patch, the jewel that protected too well, the truck, the smoke, the fire. And you wonder not whether the Romanovs were real, but whether the world has ever fully reckoned with what happened to them. Not just their deaths, but their afterlives. The way they became everything: saints, myths, mistakes, icons, ghosts. And here in this city that once erased them, they have become permanent. History has a strange sense of balance. You tear something down, and it rebuilds itself as something holier. You walk away from the church on the blood, but it stays with you. Its golden domes fade behind the trees, but the weight of what lies beneath them clings to your ribs like the smoke that once filled the Romanovs' basement. You imagine their faces again, not in icons, not behind glass, but as they were gasping, stained, trying to understand why the walls had turned on them. But now, as you drift further forward in time, you notice something else. The world is remembering them, not as rulers, not even just as victims, but as people. It begins with the diaries. Alexandra's letters to Nicholas, sometimes frantic, sometimes full of aching tenderness, surface, and are translated into a dozen languages. You read them now, line by line, the way people read poetry or old love songs. My dear, dear one, I long for you every moment. Baby is sleeping quietly. The girls send kisses. I do not know what will become of us, but I trust in God's will. They are not the words of a queen. They are the words of a wife, a mother, afraid of the end. Tatiana's letters, too, reveal glimpses of the family's final months. She writes of planting flowers in the garden, of sewing dresses, of playing piano for her siblings while the guards watch silently from the corner. Olga's poetry, haunting and vivid, survives in a small notebook smuggled out by a friend of the family. In one line she writes, "You may not hear our names again, but you will feel our absence." She wasn't wrong. The Romanovs' absence has become a presence in museums, in documentaries, in online forums full of grainy photos and dissected timelines. People search not just for facts, but for connection, for clues, for the tiny human details that make their suffering impossible to reduce. Anastasia's favorite French novels, Maria's sketches of flowers in the margins of a prayer book, Alexei's tiny walking stick, worn smooth from years of dragging it up palace corridors. Each item a breadcrumb, a whisper, Even in popular media, they won't go quietly. Films about Anastasia abound, some sincere, some absurd. The animated movie, the Broadway musical, the endless retellings of What If She Survived. None of it historically accurate. All of it emotionally resonant. Because deep down, we want at least one of them to escape. To run. To live in secret. To grow old in a quiet cottage somewhere, brushing her hair by candlelight, far from basements and bayonets. Historians roll their eyes, of course. But the public clings to it. Not because it's true, but because it should be. You move now into archives. Vast rooms filled with cardboard boxes, handwritten inventories, fragile film reels. And slowly the Romanov story is reclaimed not just from politics or propaganda, but from oblivion. Photos are restored. Home videos are digitized. You watch grainy footage of the children playing in a garden, chasing one another with parasols laughing. Real sound isn't available, but you imagine their voices. Alexei, small and cautious, trying to keep up. Tatiana, adjusting Olga's hat. Anastasia, falling over from laughter. It's achingly normal. That's what hurts the most. You walk through the restored rooms of the Alexandra Palace in Tsarskoye Selo. Their old home, now a museum. You stand in Alexandra's mauve boudoir, and the air smells faintly of lilac, though you suspect that's by design. The curtains match the ones from 1913. The piano still holds her last sheet music. Alexei's toys sit neatly on a low table, painted lead soldiers, a tiny spinning top. The place feels like a ghost playhouse, frozen at the edge of bedtime. One room over, you find Nicholas's study. The desk is neat, the ink bottle full. The same calendar paused on the day of abdication hangs on the wall. You imagine him sitting there, writing orders he no longer had the power to enforce. And you think not of the Tsar, but of the father. The man who once said, "I am not a ruler. I am simply a father of 5, trying to do his duty." Was it enough? Clearly not. But what haunts you now isn't how Nicholas ruled. It's how he ended, not as a symbol, not as a tyrant, but as a man in a dim basement asking for a chair. He never got it. There's a curious shift in modern Russia, too. A sort of uneasy reckoning. Some see the Romanovs as a tragic reminder. Others view them as saints. Still others as a cautionary tale. How absolute power isolates how revolutions eat their own, how even a palace can become a prison overnight. The government treads carefully. Too much reverence risks nostalgia. Too little invites accusations of historical erasure. So they host memorials, carefully worded plaques, speeches that speak of lessons learned and a time of great transition, but never quite say what should have been said decades ago. That this wasn't just political, it was personal. That the Romanovs didn't just die. They were allowed to be forgotten until they weren't. And now they're everywhere. In chapels, in textbooks, in the whispered prayers of babushkas, and the hashtags of teenagers posting TikToks in Romanov cosplay. You may not believe in ghosts, but the Romanovs have become something close. Not spectral, but present, lingering, not just in Russia, but in all of us who wonder what happens when a family vanishes and the world keeps going. There's something strange about visiting their graves. Maybe it's the way the air shifts when you step inside the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, how the light bends through the stained glass, how your footsteps feel heavier. Or maybe it's just the weight of knowing that this is where the Romanovs, after nearly a century of burial in silence, finally came home. The tomb is elegant. White marble, gold lettering. Flowers fresh, always neatly arranged by visitors who still call them by name. Nicholas, Alexandra, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, Alexei. They were interred here in 1998 after years of debate, DNA testing hesitation, and more debate. Even in death, the family had to wait for the Russian state to decide if they were worth remembering. The funeral was televised. A state ceremony, Russian Orthodox rites, bells, candles, priests murmuring the ancient language of death, soldiers standing at attention. And behind them all, a watching world. Some in reverence, some in awe, others in guilt. Boris Yeltsin, the president at the time, stood at the edge of the tomb and delivered the line that perhaps best captured the strangeness of the moment. We are all guilty. He wasn't wrong. The crowd included royals from Europe, distant cousins, dignitaries, a few surviving Romanov descendants, and members of the public who had spent their entire lives hearing half-truths about what happened in that basement. Some of them wept. Others stood in stony silence. Even then, not everyone agreed. Some argued it was too little too late, that you can't wrap a century of horror in incense and polished marble, that the Romanovs had been murdered not just with bullets, but with silence, and that this ceremonial reburial, while noble, was cosmetic. Others saw it as healing, closure. Not for the family, they had no choice, but for the country. And so now they rest beneath the floor of the cathedral, next to generations of czars, empresses, grand dukes, Peter the Great, Catherine, Alexandra III. But there's a difference. The Romanovs didn't rule during their final years. They suffered, they shrank, they prayed. And now even their tomb feels quiet, almost shy, like they're still not sure if they belong. You walk slowly past their names, etched in stone. The room is small. No thrones, no dramatic paintings. Just that cold white marble, the eternal hush of reverence, and a sense that here at last the screaming has stopped. But you can't help noticing that the last two Alexei and one of his sisters were not buried here until 2021, 23 years after the others. Why? Because even in the face of DNA politics interfered. The church delayed, citing uncertainty. The state wavered, unwilling to confront how many layers of betrayal it would need to peel back to get here. Alexei's tiny bones had to wait in boxes. Maria's or Anastasia's. The debate lingers weighted beside him. For years. And yet finally they too were brought to rest. Quietly. Without spectacle, almost shyly, as if trying not to disturb the others already laid to sleep. Historians still debate the ethics of it all. Was reburial justice? Was it just optics? Does it matter? You step outside the cathedral into the open air of St. Petersburg, the wind coming off the Neva River, cool and salty. The same city where 100 years earlier they had lived behind palace walls, where Alexandra once wrote of the snow falling like feathers from heaven, and Olga complained about lessons. You glance back at the spire of the cathedral, rising into the pale sky, like a needle stitching the past into the present. It's still not enough, because even buried in marble, they're not quite free. You see them everywhere. In bookstores, their faces softened on covers. In documentaries, their stories retold with smooth narration and tragic music. In school curricula taught briefly, cautiously, with just enough detail to avoid discomfort. But what about the Romanovs as people? You remember how Tatiana carried wounded soldiers' letters in her apron, how Anastasia liked to play pranks and hide under tables, how Olga read Dostoevsky at 15 and underlined every passage about suffering, how Maria asked once if the guards had children, how Alexandra kept praying even when her legs gave out, how Nicholas never imagined, even at his worst, that it would end in a basement with his daughters bleeding beside him, and Alexei crippled, laughing, stubborn, how he learned to walk again after every fall, believing he would grow up and rule a land that would finally know peace. But none of them lived to grow old, to be forgotten gently, to fade the way most families do into stories told at dinner tables, not whispered across continents. Instead, their entire arc was violence. Not just the bullets, but the forgetting, the revisions, the turning of their lives into theater. And yet, here you are thinking of them. You in the quiet, listening for footsteps in a basement long since bricked over. You're remembering how hard it is to truly bury a story, especially one where the ending was denied dignity, especially one where innocence bled into the walls, especially one where people still gather in silence and say, without quite knowing why, they didn't deserve this. You turn now to the question no monument can answer. Why did it happen? Not how they were shot, stabbed, burned, buried. You followed every terrible detail down to the last shell casing. But why? Why them? Why that night? Why the children? The most common answer is the simplest revolution doesn't pause for sentiment. The Bolsheviks, scrambling to secure power, couldn't afford to leave behind symbols. Nicholas was no longer a ruler, but he was still a threat, one whose existence inspired monarchists, foreign armies, and religious traditionalists. But even so, did that justify murdering his entire family? Even Alexei, 12 years old, and barely able to walk, historians still argue whether Lenin himself gave the order. There's no signed document, no audio recording, no smoking gun. Just telegrams, letters, vague references. He almost certainly knew. But whether he ordered it or merely allowed it remains clouded. Yurovsky, the execution's architect, claimed it was his decision, a practical matter. The White Army was approaching, and he feared the prisoners might be rescued. But others suggest the order came from above, from Sverdlov maybe, or even Lenin through indirect channels. Fringe theories go further. They claim the Romanovs were meant to be moved, not murdered. That the chaos in Yekaterinburg that night was unplanned, a spontaneous spiral. But that doesn't explain the acid, the bayonets, the gasoline, the preparations made long before the first shot was fired. No, the plan was in place, and it was carried out not with passion, but with procedure. Yurovsky had been ordered to handle it and given discretion. He chose efficiency, and yet it was anything but efficient. So again, why you stand now in the shadows of ideology? The Bolsheviks weren't just toppling a regime. They were trying to erase a mindset. The Romanovs weren't just people. They were the physical embodiment of everything the revolution wanted to destroy. Aristocracy, divine right, hereditary power, wealth that outlived its usefulness. The Empress, with her German blood and spiritual mysticism. The Tsar, with his weak will and bloody legacy. The daughter's symbols of grace and innocence. The boy, frail heir to 1,000 years of dynasty. None could survive, because if even one Romanov lived, they might inspire a movement, a myth, a hope. And nothing kills a revolution faster than hope with a last name. So they were buried not just in earth, but in silence. It wasn't just a murder, it was an obliteration. But the attempt failed. Because the revolution wanted them forgotten, and instead they became immortal. Not in power, but in pain. Not in victory, but in vulnerability. You look at the way their story survives, not as a triumph, but as a bruise. A tender spot on the world's memory. The revolution came and went. The Soviet Union rose and fell. But the faces of the Romanovs, blurry and sepia-toned, remain. Not because they were flawless, but because they were human in a moment that demanded monstrosity. Even the executioners couldn't quite live with what they'd done. Many of the guards who participated that night faded into obscurity. Some died in the purges of the 1930s, erased by the very system they had helped preserve. Others drank themselves to ruin. One reportedly went mad, convinced he still heard a girl crying every night near his window. Yurovsky lived longer. He wrote Documented Justified. But in every account you can feel the strain, the need to explain, to rationalize. As if he too couldn't quite forget the sound of those first gunshots bouncing off the basement walls. Later in life, he said, it was necessary. Maybe it was from his perspective. But necessity doesn't erase horror. It only distills it. You walk now through history's ruins, pages, photos, reenactments, shrines. The Romanovs are no longer rulers. They are no longer a threat to anyone. And yet, they still matter. Because every time you look at them, young royal fragile, you're reminded how quickly civilization can turn. How fast a home becomes a prison. How one night can rewrite 1,000 years. The last Tsar was not a good leader. His choices brought suffering, war, revolution. But in the end, he was a father holding his wife's hand. And that image, the family huddled in the dark, asking for chairs before dying, is more powerful than any throne he ever sat on. It's not about royalty. It's about what happens when humanity is denied, and what happens after. Because the basement couldn't bury them. The acid couldn't erase them. And even time-patient grinding, unrelenting time couldn't forget them. The question isn't why they died. The question is, what do we do with their memory now? You've followed them this far, through palaces and prison trains, whispered prayers and muffled gunfire. You've stood beside their graves, in the echo of their laughter, in the stifled corners of history, where no one wanted to look for too long. But now the story nears its final breath, and it's strangely quiet. You find yourself in a small apartment in modern Yekaterinburg, where a woman in her 70s lights a candle every July 17th. She wasn't alive when the Romanovs were killed. Her father wasn't either. But her grandmother whispered stories about that night, about the house, about the way the sky looked at dawn. Like it knew, she said. The woman lights her candle at 2 a.m., the exact hour the family was shot. She doesn't say anything, just watches the flame flicker, then fade. She does it every year. So do thousands of others. Every summer, just after midnight, pilgrims walk a 20-kilometer path through the forest outside Yekaterinburg. It begins at the church on the blood and ends at Ganina Yama, the mine shaft, where the Romanovs' bodies were dumped and burned. They call it the Royal Passion Bearers Procession. They walk by candlelight, in silence. Children, grandparents, priests, young couples holding hands. Some wear white, others carry icons. Along the way, they sing softly, not in sorrow, but in reverence. Because this isn't just a walk. It's a confession of guilt, of grief, of something the country still doesn't know how to name. You follow the line of pilgrims as they step into the woods. The trees are tall and silent, the same trees that watched the trucks roll in with bloodied bodies in 1918. Now they sway gently in the night breeze, brushing against the shoulders of those who pass. You pause at a wooden cross, one of many. It marks a place where someone stopped to pray. You can't see their face, but you feel the weight in their shoulders, the quiet sob at the edge of their breath. They know even if they can't say it out loud, it was too much, and it should never have happened. Ganina Yama has changed. Once just a forgotten pit, it's now a sprawling monastery. 7 chapels each, named for a member of the Romanov family. No gold, no grandeur, just dark wood candlelight pine trees. A place where even the birds sing softly. You stand at the edge of the old shaft, now filled in consecrated. People kneel, some place flowers, others just stand heads bowed. No one speaks. It's not a place for explanations, only presence. The monks keep vigil year-round. They don't speak much about the murders. They speak instead of endurance, of love, of how a family met horror without surrendering to it, of how in the end, it's not thrones or power that last, but the way we die and the way we are remembered. Even here, debates still linger. Some visitors believe in the miracles attributed to the Romanovs. Others see only the tragedy. But everyone agrees on this. No one walks away unchanged. It's difficult to imagine them now as rulers. You remember Olga's journal entry from exile. Father asked me if I missed the court. I told him not at all. I missed the garden, not power, just flowers. Alexandra's final note to her friend in Crimea, we are content. God has not forgotten us. Whatever may come, we are not afraid. And the last known words spoken aloud by Nicholas, recorded by a guard, it's hot in here. Ordinary things, human things, not royal proclamations. Just the fragments left behind when everything else is stripped away. You turn to leave the woods and realize the story of the Romanovs is no longer theirs. It's ours now. A mirror held up to every system that forgets the human inside the symbol. A reminder that even the most gilded lives can end on cold stone floors. A warning that justice and revenge are not synonyms, and that forgetting is not the same as forgiveness. But maybe also a kind of invitation to remember the value of tenderness, the quiet courage of those who carry dignity into the darkness, the strength it takes to believe in light even when the walls are closing in. They were a flawed family. They made mistakes. Their name was bound to suffering both under their rule and by their deaths. But in their final hours, they were not tyrants. They were just a mother and father, 4 daughters, 1 son, all waiting for dawn that never came. You take one last look over the forest, the chapel's the path. The night is still. And somewhere in the quiet, you imagine the faintest echo of voices, not calling for help, not demanding justice, just singing. Something gentle. Something that says, we're still here. There's only one place left to go now. Back to the basement. But not as it was. Not in blood, not in smoke, not with bullets bouncing off hidden jewels. That moment has passed. The ghosts have stepped out. The echoes have softened. The room is gone, demolished, paved over, reborn as a sanctuary. And yet, you still feel it. Because every ending, no matter how carefully erased, leaves behind a faint outline. You stand in the replica of that room, now tucked deep inside the church on the blood. It's not exact, but its close tile floor, plain walls, a small glass case holding a piece of the original brick. You feel your breathing slow, and for once nothing moves. No pilgrims, no soldiers, no whispers, just stillness. You try to picture them there one last time, not dying, not pleading, just standing. Maybe Nicholas with one arm around Alexei, the other around Alexandra. The girls in a quiet semicircle, their eyes tired, their posture uncertain. Still hoping this is just another relocation. Still believing in mourning. You can't see their faces clearly anymore. Not because you've forgotten, but because their edges have softened. They've drifted beyond history's reach and into something deeper. Something quieter. Not quite sainthood. Not quite myth. Not quite lost. Just remembered. And that might be enough. Because not all stories need resolution. Some just need to be carried, in museums, in prayers, in a candle flickering at 2 a.m. while the world sleeps and history breathes beneath the floor. We tell their story not to honor a crown, but to mourn the price of forgetting people too easily, and to promise quietly, maybe just to ourselves, that we won't let it happen again. So now gently you step back. The room fades, the night deepens, and the Romanovs at last are allowed to sleep. So now your eyes are heavy. The story has quieted the blood-stained walls, long since turned to stone and memory. You've walked through history's most shadowed corners, slowly, gently, and emerged, still breathing, still whole. Take a long breath now. Feel the weight of the blankets over you, the hush of your room, the hum of whatever world you've built for sleep. The Romanovs are gone, but you are still here, still listening, still remembering. And that matters more than you might think. It means that even the most silenced lives can find a voice again. It means history never really ends. It just slows down until someone cares enough to hear it. So as you settle deeper into the mattress, let the forest fade. Let the footsteps stop. Let the stars above Ganina Yama blink quietly behind your closed lids. Whatever ghosts were with you tonight, they've stepped back now. They're grateful maybe that someone bothered to walk with them this far. And you did well. You remembered. You stayed awake long enough to honor the ending, and now you can let it go. Let the breath deepen. Let the muscles loosen. Let the memories soften. Sleep comes slow, like snowfall, gentle, quiet, impossible to stop. And as you drift off, maybe you'll carry with you the peace they never got in life. The kind of peace that only comes when the story is finally told. And when someone somewhere is listening. Good night.